What was your finest moment of revenge? Story 1. When I was 11 years old, I was bullied by a 12-year-old boy. He would steal things from my lunch every day. I got sick of it and decided to do something about it. One day I brought a super hot pepper to my lunch and pretended to be really excited about it. Sure enough, the boy comes over, snatches it from my hand and pops it into his mouth. He practically exploded in pain, writhing around the floor, unable to handle the heat. I calmly looked at him and told him that drinking a nice glass of cold water would help immensely. He did so. This promptly magnified the pain 100 times. He never stole food from me again. I regret nothing. Story 2. Driving home around 2 in the morning, 2 cars ahead of me. One is clearly giving the other car a hard time, tailgating him, cutting him off, windows open, and he's yelling at the other guy. I catch up at the light and see a scared older man, 70 plus, getting verbally cussed out by the skid. Now I'm totally sober and I know the cops hang out in the back of the parking lot at work. There are security guards in their off hours. I get the punk's attention and he starts harassing me. 1 mile to go, cussing at me, trying to cut me off. I pull into the parking lot and he follows up. Whip down to the back and yep, there's the cop. Lights come on. Both of us get pulled over, the other guy is screaming and I only have to explain for 30 seconds what happened. I leave the scene like I did my good deed for the day. Story 3. For 10 months I had the worst roommate ever. A 40-year-old guy who acted like he was 21. His parents support him and pay for his condo, which I rented a room with no lease. As such, I had no tenant rights, which he took advantage of. He was loud, drunk, drugged out, and yelling racial obscenities at the TV daily. He was constantly forcing me to listen to his rants about things he had no real knowledge about. This guy was the most spoiled, entitled, and considerate narcissistic person I've ever met. The day I was supposed to move out, he passed the f*** out from the days-long alcohol and drug binge. I moved all my stuff into the truck and was driving off when it hit me. There was a possum carcass on the side of the road near the condo. I went back up, grabbed his barbecue tongs and a bag, and picked up the carcass. I walked back up again, went in, opened the door to his room, and whipped that carcass onto his bed, and walked out of that place for the last time. He never even stirred as the dead possum, rotting and baked by the sun, landed next to him with a sickening plop. He deserves worse, actually, but I did what I could. Story 4. I was once staying at a friend's house in the 7th grade. His older sister thought it would be a good idea to embarrass him in front of me by cracking an egg over his head from the top of the balcony when we got home from school. My friend was infuriated, woke me up at 5 a.m. the next morning, went into the kitchen and started whisking a bowl of eggs. 5 minutes later and 5 eggs later, we went downstairs to his sister's room where he poured the whole bowl of whisked eggs onto her face. The look of horror as she woke up with her face covered in egg was probably one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my entire life. To this day, I should never f*** with him again. Story 5. My first real boyfriend. We kissed instead of just holding hands, kissed another girl and dumped me for her when I was a freshman in high school. She had actively pursued him, although she knew he had a girlfriend, so I blamed her rather than him. Fast forward 4 years. I was a volleyball player throughout college. In the off-season, I played in a city's women league and a co-ed league as an outside hitter. My team played a new team with a familiar face. She didn't recognize me, different high schools, but I immediately recognized her. My team setter kept giving me amazing sets and I kept slamming the ball over the net, just waiting for my shot. Finally, she was in the back row and my setter set me up. I hit the ball and the boyfriend stealer stepped into the hit. It bounced off her foot and went straight up into her face and broke her nose. That's talent right there. Story 6. This is more petty revenge, but yeah. A few years back, my 15-year-old cousin was staying over at my place, which I shared with my boyfriend at the time. Her parents were on vacation in Cuba for a few weeks. While she was with us, we had to make all of our food. She couldn't cook and waited for me or my boyfriend to come home. Otherwise, she would only eat chips or popcorn. She wouldn't even make a sandwich. One day, she updated her Facebook status, which was a whiny complaint about how bored she was. She had free reign to go out, and how weird I was. I guess she forgot I have her on Facebook. It really pissed me off since I made all of her meals and tried my best to keep her company. That night when I was making her a turkey sandwich, I took my revenge. I used the end slices of the bread loaf to build the sandwich and the bitter white part of a romaine lettuce leaf. I also put too much mayo on it. She ate that sandwich and she had a look of annoyance on her face. But there was nothing she could do. Story 7. This may seem small, but this was the most satisfying thing I've ever done. When I was in the 7th grade, I sat behind a jerk who hated me and enjoyed being annoying. Every single goddamn day, he would lean back in his chair and hit the front of my desk over and over again. If I was trying to write something, he would do it even harder. So one day I decided enough was enough. And in the middle of a lesson, he started again. So I waited. And right as he was leaning in his chair back fast, trying to knock my desk hard, I pulled it back. Without my desk behind him, his chair tipped right over and he hit the ground hard. I can still clearly remember whispering, "You b," beneath the laughter of the whole class and the teacher yelling at him to get up. The look on his face was a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and pure rage as he looked up at me from the floor. The bastard never f***ed with me again. I was expecting you to tape a sharpened pencil to the front of your desk, but well played. F*** his ass. Story 8. A repair shop in Moab, Utah messed up our car, which left us stranded in a nearby national park. We called and demanded they tow the vehicle in, and while they said they'd come to get us, they never did. When we talked with park rangers, they were quite familiar with the shop, the biggest in town, and with a terrible reputation. We were on our honeymoon and we had more time on our hands than I imagine most travelers do. We went to the shop, demanded a full refund, and when they refused, we sat out front on the curb in our camp chairs for 2 days with homemade protest signs. I was overwhelmed by the support we got from locals, who honked and waved, stopped and chatted with us, and shared their own stories of horror. The owner called the cops on us, but the joke was on him. We'd already notified the police we'd be protesting. We were well within our rights in doing so. In the end, the shop owner refunded all our money and left visibly distressed when we told him that even with a refund, we weren't sure we were ready to leave town. Eventually we did, but not before filing complaints with the Better Business Bureau and every review site we could find. They'd already been booted from the Chamber of Commerce. We ended up becoming friends with an awesome local mechanic and having a great story to tell. Justice was served, and without a tinge of guilt. That sounds like a great honeymoon your wife will always remember. Story 9. When I used to be a cheerleader, we were organizing a trip to Florida from the UK to do some training and to have an awesome holiday. I took charge of organizing the flights and asked everyone if they were okay paying me back if I bought all the flights together. Yeah, I know, bad idea. Anyway, needless to say, one girl changed her mind about going because she was starting a new job, and just before we were due to go, I got a handwritten note in the post from her mother, we were in our 20s, saying that she never agreed to me booking a flight on her behalf and that she wasn't liable to pay me because she had decided not to go. I was in a bit of a panic because I didn't have her home address, and she just ignored all my calls and emails. I wanted to take her to court, but to do that, you have to have their address in order to serve the papers. After spending ages trying to ask around if people knew her address, and even trying to get her friends to give it to me without success, I stayed up all night figuring out a way to figure out where she lived. It literally took me all night, but I managed to hack into her Hotmail account and then her PayPal account, which led me to her home address. I could have just taken the money from her account, but I did want to do this as by the book as possible. She turned up in court accompanied by her mother, and they tried to use Facebook photos to prove that I had used her ticket to take someone else in her place. I came armed with a printout of the airline terms which clearly stated that the tickets were non-transferable. Judgment was swift, the victory was mine. Story 10. David, the kid I was friends with, hit me in the balls 3 times in one night, then called me a wee baby and got in my face. He tried to make me flinch by half swinging at me. I didn't flinch, but instead headbutted him with everything I had. Crushed his nose, blood pouring out of his face. I had a tiny cut in the center of my forehead, with one line of blood running down my face. I looked psychotic, but badass. Also, f*** you for that, David. This has to have been in Scotland. Story 11. Okay, I have 2 older brothers. Eldest is a good person. The middle is a monster. He is a meth-addled felon. He has tortured my family for 20 years, and I have taken the brunt of the assault as the only person willing to openly challenge him. He stole my mother's wedding rings, my grandmother's car, and my TV, to name a few things. My family has decided to try again to welcome him back into their lives, so I followed suit. It's Christmas 2013, the best holiday celebration I could ever imagine. All is well. Middle brother walks in the door to collect presents 2 days after celebrations. Strike 1. Middle brother drops a bag of when he walks in the door. Strike 2. My middle brother criticizes my eldest brother's renovations and tells my grandmother she wasted her money. Strike 3. In the car on the way home, we decided it is best to go back into town together so it saves someone a trip. My middle brother asks me for my passport. I say, no, I can't do that. My middle brother concocts a magical story where I borrowed his ID to get into clubs when I was a teenager. Lies. I did not and would not. He says he needs it to get into a party. He's 300 pounds and 35 and would never be carded under any circumstances. Middle brother differs from his standard method of persuasion, starts yelling and getting increasingly loud and argumentative. I tell him that it is illegal and that it would be very bad for him if he gets caught. There's a line somewhere between asking and demanding something of someone. He crosses it. My heart races like it used to when I was a boy, and he used to follow my friends and me and beat the shit out of us with his friends. I remember him pulling me out of a lake where I almost drowned. But it's not him anymore. The brother I knew is gone and there's a total stranger directly behind me demanding the symbol of my liberty. Strike 4. I tell him that if he mentions my passport again on the ride home, I'll crane the steering wheel into a snowbank and beat him until within an inch of his life. I hear, Give me your passport in the voice of a man I don't know, from a face I don't recognize. Blood and adrenaline surge from my heart faster and more rapidly than I've ever felt. We pull into a parking lot. I open my door and wait patiently until that works up the courage to fight me. He steps out and yells something I don't hear. I tell him that I'll give him one more chance to get back in the car without saying a word about my passport ever again. He says, "Passport," with a willy grin and expects me to be the same cowering boy that I used to be. The same kid who loved him and adored him and wanted nothing else but to be just like him. I connect the quickest and hardest fist I've ever thrown against another person directly onto his chin. Blood spurts out of his mouth with the second blow. He hits me twice above and below my right eye. I completely lose my shit and wail on the left side of his face until it is a broken and bloody ruin. If you're reading this, middle brother, fuck you. I have the biggest revenge boner right now. Story 12. Not me, but my mom. When I was 9, I'm 26 now, my parents went through a really rough divorce. Long story short, my dad had a very public and long-term affair with a prominent public figure in our area. We'll call her Debbie. Naturally, my mother was humiliated, but back then she was quite meek and assuming and not at all vindictive. She only did one thing to the woman that broke up my family. My mom is a nurse, and about 6 months after the divorce, she was attending a medical conference in our area. As she walks into the room, she saw that one of the panelists was the woman who slept with her husband. Shocked, but always in control, my mother calmly walked to the very front of the row and sat down silently in front of Debbie. Now, Debbie had been a family friend for over a decade, so my mom was intimately familiar with her upbringing and unfortunate issues. Remembering that she was an English Lit major in undergrad, my mom took out a red Sharpie and drew a very large A on the notebook that she brought to the conference. She turned it around and faced it directly at Debbie, never saying a word. Debbie was visibly agitated, and when it came time for her to speak, something amazing happened. She started ticking. You see, my mother also knew that Debbie had a condition that, when under immense stress, despite significant speech therapy and experience in public speaking, she began to twitch and stutter. She twitched so much that it impaired her speech, and she had to rush her portion. When she ended, my mother calmly shut her notebook, smiled at the woman, and walked out of the room. She never spoke a word. That was the last they saw of each other. Literary burn. Story 13. Late to the party, but here's mine. In high school, one of my best friends started dating my ex-boyfriend that day after we broke up, which happened to be my 16th birthday. So then and there, I decided to ruin her sweet 16, but just wasn't sure how. Fast forward 3 months, she planned an extravagant birthday party and played hooky from school the Friday before the big party to prepare. This was my opportunity. I told everyone at school that she had gotten the flu and was postponing the party, hence why she wasn't in school. We were neighbors, so everyone bought it. The next day, she got all dolled up and arrived at her sweet 16 party in a large rented ballroom, only to spend the entire party with her mom and little sister. Not one person showed up. Looking back, it was terrible and mean, but to a 16-year-old girl, I felt she broke the sacred girl code. That's never okay. Story 14. I was living in a Middle Eastern country a few years back. Nice place, but because 50% of the population in the region is under the age of 20, the roads are simply overrun by teenage and early 20s douchebags. The culture's fatalism makes young guys even more reckless and irresponsible than they are already programmed to be by their hormones. So after a rare rain shower, the highway's flooded up again, 18 inches deep. Traffic is backed up for at least a mile, and it takes us 15 minutes to get to the flooded patch. Everyone is pissed. Then I see 2 cars full of teenage douchebags passing people on the shoulder on the right from way behind me. There's just no excuse for that horse. Eventually they get to where I am and they pass me just as we're reaching the 50-yard stretch where the flooding is crossing the road. And wouldn't you know it, one of them crosses into the far left lane and one stays in the right lane to avoid the deep water, in the middle lane. And wouldn't you know it, their windows are rolled down. I'm in a Toyota Land Cruiser, a nice big 4WD, so while they're crawling through a foot of water in their little Action Boy Hondas, I decide f*** it and gun it between them through the deep stuff in the middle lane. The wave from my front wheels was about 6 feet high, and it had to have put 20 gallons of water through the windows of both cars, completely drenched. All of them, with nasty urban stormwater runoff. Of course, they chased up after me once they cleared the water, screaming and cursing, but I just pretended to be on my phone and ignored them. Eventually, they gave up and, I hope, figured I had just been as impatient and selfish as them and had hosed in my accident. Most satisfying revenge of my life. This is my favorite. That's excellent revenge. Story 15. In 4th grade gym, I discovered heartbreak, revenge, and victory all in one class period. Moments before class had started, my boyfriend dumped me because I was too weird. There I sat in disbelief and sadness, and he just ran around like nothing happened. We were put on opposite teams, only making the chasm between us greater. Now I am possibly the worst person at sports, wiffle ball being no exception. I stepped up to the orange rubber plate, the bat heavy in my hands, the ex was pitching and called out to everyone in the outfield. "Don't worry about this one, she can't hit anything." I was embarrassed. I was heartbroken. Mostly I was pissed. I said nothing, watching as he casually cocked back his arm. His eyes gleamed as the ball flew from his grip, careening towards me. I raised my bat and swung with all of my measly strength. The wiffle ball met my bat with a dull plastic whack. Next, the wiffle ball met the ex's balls, square on. I watched as he crumpled to the floor, a wailing heap. My team cheered for me as I ran around the bases, greeting me with high fives as I cleared home. It was beautiful. Story 16. An old post of mine. I used to go to a public school where the majority of students were low to middle class Italian origin kids of immigrants, 90% plus. Tough going, to say the least. When I was in high school, I used to get bullied by a guy called Ronaldo. We had a few scraps, either verbally or fisticuffs over the years. I was always the type of guy who wouldn't take other people's shit, and while others bugged at giving me a hard time, particularly when I went through puberty and became one of the tallest, largest guys in school, he somehow always managed to give me a hard time. It was a tough time, but in a way, I paid my dues early and learned from a stern father that if people punched you, you punch back and you punch harder, and you'll know if they are men or not. As luck would have me, Ronaldo ended up in the same college I went to, and he always managed to somehow, some way be a little shit to me. What made things worse is that we fell for the same girl, Andrea, who eventually became my girlfriend of over 4 years. Everyone knew he had feelings for her and that it killed him she was with me and not him. He always tried to seduce her with random calls and emails. Being the son of a wealthy father who owned his own construction company, that he had nice cars, lots of money, and a bunch of shit that I didn't have and over the years worked hard to earn, coming from a low-income family that was having problems making ends meet. He was a constant issue during the first years of my relationship, and we had several conflicts. Years later after college and shortly after I broke up with Andrea, I received an email from him out of the blue. I never corresponded with him. Facebook didn't exist back then. And he went out and told me in an epic letter that went too far long, swore at me in excess and used terrible English, no wonder he never finished college, and dropped out to work with daddy. Basically, it was a no one liked me in college and to fuck off. I haven't seen him in well over 2 years, nor did we have any real friends in common. As a way to keep my cool, did I want him to have the satisfaction to get me mad? I never responded to his emails. He sent several. However, I couldn't let his taunting go without consequences, so I went online and Googled his name. After searching around a bit, I easily found a complete profile of him regarding his career, where he worked, and what type of work it was. His father passed away recently, and he now owned his father's business and had a team of employees working for him. I spied a bit more and hung on to the address of his place of employment for several weeks while I plotted. One day I proceeded to go into a local shop and purchase the largest, fattest, floppiest black dildo that I could find. Along with some KY jelly, I went home, wrote a special note for him, and put it along with a big fat black dildo and KY jelly, and boxed it in a standard box that couldn't be traced back to me, and sent it priority mail that required for him specifically to sign. The note read, "Since you have so much time to search out people that never gave a shit about you to begin with, I figured you'd have enough time to go fuck yourself with this." One of our mutual acquaintances dropped me an email a few days later. This acquaintance worked for Ronaldo during his internship, and apparently the package arrived while they were preparing to head out for a team lunch on a Friday. He was very excited to get the box opened, since Ronaldo thought it was something he ordered online that he was expecting and would make it a good weekend. And he opened it in front of a number of coworkers, and instead of whatever he ordered, he pulls out a giant black floppy dildo. Priceless.
Serious. What revenge of yours hit the victim way worse than you thought it would? To the point you said, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Story 1. I think I've told this before, but I think I was 15 and was in class and sat next to a friend of mine. He, for no reason, began to say, "Ha ha, your bald father," which I followed up with, "Ha ha, your bald mother." He started crying and ran to the teacher. I honestly forgot his mom had cancer and was getting chemo. Story 2. 9th grade honors English class. The teacher didn't like me. The only teacher I ever had that didn't like me. Others would get frustrated, lack of effort at times, but still liked me as a person. She just flat out didn't like me. One of the reasons was that she didn't like athletes, because they would miss her class regularly to travel for games. And I played 3 sports, so I was missing a good bit. Now, I was also missing academic stuff like math/science competitions and quiz bowl tournaments, but she was particularly bothered about missing sports. Case in point, She would intentionally double the amount of homework due the day after long away games, knowing that the players wouldn't have the time to finish it all. And shocker, she didn't check homework every single day, but always checked after away games. I've written about her before, but she would also give me 70s and low 80s on papers without any red marks on them, but people around me would have red marks all over their papers and would have 90s. After one particularly low grade on an assignment that I knew I had actually done really well on, I inquired about it. Her exact response was that I was only doing 70% of my ultimate capability, and the others were doing 90% of theirs. So I specifically asked, does that mean my paper can be better than someone else's, but be 20 plus points lower? And she said, yes. And to show this wasn't just me misunderstanding things, she recommended me for an advanced writing class a year earlier than students were supposed to be able to take it. So if those two things weren't bad enough, she gave us an opportunity for extra credit toward the end of the year. We had to go to a local college's rendition of Antigone, write a 2,500-word paper on it, and tie it into what we had discussed in class on the play, and also turn in our ticket and playbill. It was due on a Monday, and the play was only going on Friday to Sunday, so there was no way to turn it in ahead of time. But I was going to miss class that Monday all day for an academic competition representing the school, and it was the biggest one of the year, like having to place top 10 in a previous competition to qualify. So it's obviously an excused absence. I told her for an entire week prior to the play that I was going to miss it on Monday, and she told me multiple times to turn it in first thing Tuesday morning. So I go to the play, write the paper, go to the academic competition Monday, and place first in one category and second in another, and then Tuesday morning before basketball workouts at 7 a.m., I go to her room to turn in the assignment. She refuses to take it because it's late, and she didn't recall ever suggesting that I could turn it in on Tuesday. She told me 4 times. Her reasoning: 1, another student that missed the competition was able to turn it in, but that student lived across the street from the school. I lived 20 minutes away and couldn't drive. 2, my mom was a teacher at the school, so I could have just sent it with her. Except I had been told to turn it in on Tuesday, so there was no reason for me to think to have my mom turn in my assignment for me. Plus, she has her own students and classes to worry about. 3, I could have done the work Monday evening, which wouldn't be fair to the other students. So I went into the metadata for the paper that showed the last time it had been saved was Saturday afternoon. She still refused to grant me any credit for it. So I was out the $25 for the ticket, the time that it took, plus it really inconvenienced my mom, who had to pick me up Friday from practice, rush me home to shower and change, then rush me back downtown for the play, and then come pick me up again 2 hours later. So my mom was pretty pissed about it too. This teacher also prided herself on the fact that nobody had ever made an A on her final exam. She thought she was the toughest teacher ever. Really, she just loaded students up with a bunch of busy work. So on the last day of class, she gave a few minutes at the end of class and asked, "What's your biggest wish?" to the class as a whole. I piped up, "I wish for an A on the exam." And she laughed and said, "Yeah, and I wish for $1 million and not to have to deal with you anymore." So all of that sets up the final exam. It's 100 questions and then a 5-point bonus question that asks those generic, "What was your favorite part of the class? What did you learn?" etc. We got 2 hours to take the exam, and students that finished early had to wait until 1 hour was up so that there was just 1 point of people getting up and leaving, rather than being distracted throughout. So I finished the 100 questions in about 20 minutes, so I spent the remaining part of the hour just blasting her with the bonus question. I said that I'm not sure I learned anything, and pointed to her never making any comments on how to improve my writing. I said my favorite part of the class was it finally being over and not having to deal with her crap anymore, and brought up a number of other little things that happened on top of that mentioned above. And I said that she was by far the worst teacher I had ever had, and that the school is worse off with her teaching the entire 9th grade. The bell rings for the hour, and I'm the only person of the entire 110 students to leave at the hour mark. Now, on exam days, the teacher doesn't proctor their own exams so that they are available to answer questions, or if the classes are split among different rooms. So I have to wait for my mom to finish proctoring a different exam, so I'm just sitting out in the breezeway. The teacher finds me, holding my exam, with tears in her eyes, and tells me to meet her in the principal's office. She then storms off, so I head over. As I'm waiting there, I recount what happened to the soccer coach who was sitting there because he made some comment about, "Surprised to see you sent in here." Eventually, she comes back in with my mom, who she pulled out of proctoring an exam, and we all go in to see the principal. She's crying, screaming, literally choking every minute or so. After about 45 minutes of me spilling everything I'd gone through that year, all things I'd already vented to my mom about plenty of times, the principal finally looks at her and goes, "How much was the question worth?" She said, 5 bonus points. And he says, "Then just don't give him the bonus points." So I made a 98 on the final instead of 103. Missed 2 questions. Every other student got the bonus points, and the next highest grade was 81. Thinking she would get the last laugh, I noticed a few days before grades were due that one of my assignments from the second week of class, all the way back in August, had dropped 10 points. My final grade ended up being 94.4, which was a B at the time. But I couldn't prove that she had altered my grade. I just had them all in a spreadsheet to determine my grade ahead of time. Should have been a 95.2. But nothing that would prove anything since I could have just typed it wrong. I didn't. The summer after, the school decided to change to a 10-point grade scale, and so 90 plus was an A, so my B became an A. She also had to have her homework assignments each week signed off by the department chair, and she had to start accepting assignments via email. 2 years later, she was fired after other students started having real issues with her. Prior to me, the administration just thought it was a case of students complaining about the hard teacher. Still think she deserved every bit of it, but I certainly didn't think it would set in motion her getting fired. Though, again, she deserved it. Hopefully people are still reading. She sucked. Story 3. In elementary school, there was a bully kid who would make fun of me. I had a bowl cut and was pretty small, so it wasn't surprising. Me and my friends usually just ignored him. Anyway, one day, this kid from Brazil moved into the house next to mine. He was a year older. We used to play soccer together every day after school. I mentioned to him once that this kid would call me names and usually while walking home from school would follow behind me taunting me. One day I'm leaving school and this kid is going slowly behind me on his bike, shouting stuff. Just dumb kid stuff, you know? The Brazilian kid comes out of nowhere, knocks the kid off his bike, and just starts beating him. The bully is on the grass crying and bleeding. The Brazilian kid grabs the bike and gives it to me. "You can keep this," and then walks away. I didn't know what to do. I just laid the bike next to the kid and walked home. He wasn't at school for like a week. Later in life, I found that kid had a really crappy home situation with abusive parents. I was 10 at the time. Always felt bad for that. Quit bullying me, though. I still occasionally see that Brazilian guy. Don't think he even remembers it. Cool on him for helping in his way. I just think it went too far. Story 4. I was dating this girl, and my friend saw her around town a few times and humiliated her in an effort to embarrass me. I told him to stop bothering her, but he did it again. That night, I convinced him to try getting back together with the wildly insane and manipulative ex to whom he hadn't spoken to in years, thinking that he would just humiliate himself by trying. Well, they banged and got back together for a while, and had a baby. Now they're terrible single parents. Jesus, I think the consequences from this one are the worst in the thread. Story 5. My friends and I used to pull a lot of pranks on each other growing up, and about 10 years ago I was helping my buddy set up a new business. He was ordering business cards and the company he was going through was offering, I think, 500 or so free with a large order, so we decided to prank our other friend. We made business cards with his name, phone number, and home address, and had his job title as Professional Creep, with the slogan, "If I'm creepin', you ain't sleepin'." We passed these cards out all over town. He was getting really harassing phone calls for a while and couldn't figure out why. After about 2 years, he found one of the cards on a random fridge at a party and put 2 and 2 together. He was pissed and is still getting random calls 10 years later. I feel really bad about that one. Jesus, change your number. Story 6. Had a lawyer a few years back who was a piece of absolute crap. Would go months between returning phone calls, constantly late with court filings, to the point the courts multiple times moved to have the case dismissed from lack of action. Lied to me constantly about anything and everything. Refused to be fired. Seriously, when I told him he was fired, he just ignored me and kept presenting himself as my lawyer. I had to get the courts involved to get him to stop. Lied about me. Our client has been unreachable, and we are considering dropping them. I tried to call you 84 times in the last 3 months and you didn't answer or return a single one? When I finally did fire him, he told me I had to be in court on a specific date that didn't work for me, at a specific time that didn't work for me, or else the motion to withdraw wouldn't be accepted. So I go to the courtroom and the judge was super nice, but confused as to why I was there. And when I told him the story, the judge just goes, "Yeah, this is all done electronically. Not sure why your lawyer would tell you that, other than to be a dick." Needless to say, by the end of all this, I was pissed and wrote a 10-page bar complaint about 4 different lawyers in their office's unethical behavior. Well, the Bar Association decided this was a firm-wide encouraged pattern of behavior and threw the book at the 4 partners. Disbarred for 5 years, restitution to clients, and only allowed practicing under supervision for a period of 5 years after they return. I felt a little bad, but goddamn, I was so freaking sick of being jerked around. Story 7. My brother and cousins were walking home from school. Well, my brother and I were walking, and my cousins were on bikes. They kept circling us and making fun of us because we didn't have bikes. One of my cousins then spits on me. Out of reflex, I blasted her with my trumpet case, and she went flying, landed on the concrete, and broke her arm. I felt awful. It was the first and last time I ever hit a girl. My family believed every word of the story, knew this cousin was always a total witch to me, and largely believed she had it coming. I still feel awful, though. The trumpet case. An elegant weapon for a more civilized age. Story 8. Oh, I have one for this. My grandpa was a bit old school and gave me prison yard advice for my first week of school. He said, if anyone picks on you, just deal with them right then, don't take it. First week of kindergarten, a grade 1 kid was pushing me around, not letting me go back to class. I pushed him down against a fence and kicked him in the face 3 or 4 times, splitting his nose. Almost got kicked out of school, until they found out my grandpa had told me to do it. Thing is, no one messed with me after, and the guy was nice to me all the way through to graduation. So, Grandpa gave you good advice, huh? Story 9. My sister used to kick my ass on the regular. She had mad anger problems and would go berserk over the littlest things. One time I turned the light on while she was trying to sleep. She beat me up and I ended up going to prom with bruises all over me. All through the years, I never hit her back. I was a super sensitive kid, and if I ever hit back, I ended up crying to my mom about how I loved my sister and hated to hurt her. After I graduated, she calmed down a bit, but she still had issues. Coming back from a small party one night, and she's back on her old crap, just getting mad over something stupid and going totally crazy over it. We get home and get out of the car, and I say I'm driving home. She keeps saying I'm too drunk, even though I'd only had 2 to 3 mini beers. She grabs the back of my shirt, and I'm so pissed off at her, I turn around really fast with my fist out to hit her arm or something. She immediately lets out a blood-piercing scream and drops to the ground. Blood is spurting everywhere. She leaves a trail as she runs inside and wakes up our mom and dad. Turns out I broke her nose pretty freaking bad. But my mom and dad kept saying it couldn't be that bad because I had done it, and that she must have really been screwing with me for me to have done something like that after all these years of her beating on me. I felt so awful. I cried and tried to say sorry, but she ended up going to the hospital. I don't feel so bad now because she purposely never paid the bill, thinking she could bully me into paying it, and she never lets it go. She always says I'm the reason her credit and stuff are bad, and that she still has collections agencies calling her over the ER bill. I ain't paying that crap. Consider it payment for the years of abuse. Story 10. A kid on my track team would always come by and take a drink of whatever I had with me. I was sick of it, and brought a root beer with me which had been spiked with 3 times of the recommended dose of root beer-flavored X-Lax. Sure enough, he came by and I said, "You know what, Tony? Why don't you just take the whole thing?" Well, we were having a home meet that day and he was our best pole vaulter and part of the relay team. I thought maybe he'd feel a little off and underperform. In the midst of our warm-ups, he went missing and was absent the entire meet. Story 11. This one wasn't really a planned revenge, but it's one I still feel guilty about whenever I think about it. When I was a kid, I was extremely easy to scare by jump scares, and I hated them. I would always enter fight or flight mode whenever something jumped out at me, and then I'd be mad as hell afterward. When my buddies caught on to this, they made it their business in life to jump out at me and scare me any chance they got. Despite my hate of being scared, I was a huge fan of Halloween, and I had a Halloween party every year either close to or on the big day. Naturally, this was the night when all my friends would do their damnedest to scare me so badly that I would bolt and run. They succeeded a few times when we were all under 9 years old, but something shifted in me the year I turned 10, and none of us knew until it was too late. As usual, I had my big Halloween party. As usual, all my buddies were there, and as usual, one of them wanted to try and scare the pants off me. About midway through the evening, I went down the hall to use the restroom, and while I was in there, my friend, I'll call him Aaron, scampered down the hall after me and hid in a darkened doorway. I came out of the restroom and stared down the hall, and Aaron jumped out at me and grabbed my arm. Ordinarily, something like this would have made me bolt like a little kid, but for some reason, that night, the fight side of my fight or flight got turned off. The moment he grabbed me, I whirled and punched him square in the face without even thinking about what I was doing. It was all pure instinct, and after impact, I realized what I'd just done and freaked out. Aaron wrenched his mask off and was clutching his face and groaning, or so I thought, and I yelled for my dad, concerned I had really hurt my friend. My dad and all my other friends came running down the hall to find out what happened. My dad flipped on the hallway light, and what greets us? Aaron with his face covered in blood. I am instantly horrified, thinking I busted his nose, but as I'm spewing apologies to him, I begin to realize he's not groaning, he's laughing. He grabs me by the hand I'd punched him with and yelled, "What are you apologizing for? That was freaking awesome!" And he yanked my hand up over my head like I was a boxing champ and started telling everyone how cool it was of me to just haul off and slug him. If you haven't guessed, Aaron was a pretty cool kid. He thought it was great that I'd suddenly found the courage to defend myself. My dad helped him get cleaned up, though he insisted on keeping his now bloody costume on, and inspected his nose. Thankfully, it wasn't actually broken, but I still feel a wave of guilt when I remember the sight of his face, covered in blood, and remember the feeling of my fist hitting him in the schnoz. I'll always be grateful to him for handling it so well, and encouraging me for standing up for myself. But I still feel so guilty about decking him that I can't even imagine how I would feel if I had actually broken his nose. I like this story. Your friend is awesome. Story 12. Had a roommate who basically let his new girlfriend move into our house in college. She helped herself to everything in the house but never contributed. Finally, she parked in my parking spot and that was my breaking point. I let all the air out of all of her tires, thinking she'd just air them back up and it would be an inconvenience. Instead, she ended up buying all new tires. Whoops. Never came clean about it. She's an idiot. Story 13. Back in middle school, a friend of mine threw a small wadded piece of paper at me. I retaliated by throwing the only thing I could find, which was mud close to my shoes. Smacked him right in the face with it. The worst part is, it turned out to be dog poo that was at the bottom of my shoe. I still vividly remember his angry, "The hell, man, I throw paper at you and you throw dog crap?" Story 14. When I was a kid, I was at a local river, a great swimming spot lots of people came to. My friend pushes me into the river and naturally, I come up spluttering and a little red in the face. But it was all good fun. For the rest of the day, I planned to get her back, waiting for my opportunity to push her in, until she was at the edge of the river drying off. I pushed her, but her flailing and the slippery nature of the rocks she was on made her slip on the spot, and instead of just splashing into the water, she landed on her back, hitting the rocks hard, and then fell into the water. She was winded, but thankfully otherwise unharmed. Our parents were furious at me, and I just spent the few seconds it took to get her out. Felt like a lot longer to me, just hoping I hadn't broken her back or something. 2 out of 10 revenge. Would not do it again. Story 15. My older brother was always quite horrible to me as a child, and my parents never really did much about it. He was also much bigger than me, so I couldn't retaliate in a physical way, because I would be swiftly cripple-cross-faced / wall of Jericho'd. One day I had just had enough. My revenge? He had been playing Rome Total War for a good 6 hours a day for about 3 weeks. I started a new game and overwrote his save file. Never seen fury like it. I regretted it at the time because he was so angry it scared me, and it made him dislike me even more. But now I praise my 13-year-old self for hitting him where it clearly hurt most.
What's the most satisfying act of revenge that you've ever experienced? Story 1. It was actually against me, if that gives you any clue as to how justified and perfect it was. When I was 4 and my brother was 6, we were on our way to great-grandfather's funeral. My parents stopped at McDonald's, and out of my brother's small fry bag, the 4.5-inch tall white bag of fries, he pulled out an 11-inch fry. Impossible, right? We were in the back seat and I saw it. He yelled to my parents to witness this awesome fry, but before they could turn around, I snatched it and ate it. He was upset. Whatever. 12 years later, I was home after school with no parents around. My friends were hanging out in the kitchen. Everyone was scurrying around for an after-school snack. My brother and I were at the table, and our friends were in the other part of the kitchen. Out of this bag of wavy Lays, I pulled a potato chip that was literally the size of my skull. I had no idea how this thing didn't break in transit. I was like, "Oh my god, guys, look at this chip." My brother reached across with his right hand and crushed the chip to crumbs. I had what the eyes bearing down on him, and he simply said, "That's for the fry." 12 years had passed, and we had never spoken about it. But it took less than a second to remember everything and just nod in agreement that the score was settled. One enormous potato product for another. True story. Story 2. This one time I was about 15 or 16. I was about to walk inside my building. I just placed the keys in the lock when I saw 2 girls walking by behind me reflected in the door. I could hear one of them say as she pointed at me, "Let's talk to this guy." But then her friend said, "No, not him. He's ugly. Let's go." The girl who actually wanted to talk to me was cute and everything. Man. So not only did her friend block me, so to speak, but she also called me ugly, and that hurt. I walked upstairs, went into my place, and then walked over to the balcony to see if I could spot the girls. They were right across the street talking to each other. The blocker was being a bit loud and obnoxious. That did it for me. I walked back into the kitchen, grabbed a slice of ham, and swoosh, threw it at the girl. Direct hit. She had a total what the look on her face, which made me smile. Of course, in retrospect, that was a stupid thing to do, and I wouldn't do it again. Story 3. I couldn't stand this one kid who I went to high school with, who lived a few blocks away in the neighborhood. One night, he sent cops to my parents' house, where I was still living, telling them I had done something I didn't do. Luckily, I had a receipt in my pocket from the restaurant I was at in a suburb 10 miles away that was timestamped half an hour later than when he said the incident occurred. Regardless, my parents were woken up, etc., etc. I was pissed. Well, a few days later, my mom bought some plants that she left in the kitchen window. Our family cat was a nutball to begin with, but all of a sudden, he was constantly jumping on the counters, eating these plants. When I'd try and shoo him down, he would actually take a defensive stance and hiss and scratch. 10 minutes later, he would be back, chewing on the leaves. I asked my mom what the plants were, and she said, "They have a really pretty flower. I'm going to plant them in the backyard when the weather warms up." I was like, "Not a chance you're planting these in our backyard. Look what you're doing to the cat. He's an aggressive stoner. You'll bring every cat in the neighborhood and they will all fight, all night long." Suddenly, at that exact moment, a revenge plot was born. The following night, I snuck into his backyard and planted the catnip everywhere. My friend who lived across the street from him told me it worked perfectly, that he was always complaining about cats fighting in his backyard after that. Revenge. No physical confrontation, no property damage, just stone cats. Felt a little like some sort of supervillain, sending out my cat minions to do my dirty work. Story 4. Once in the 1st grade, I took off my shoe because I had a rock in it. For no reason other than this kid was a huge ass. The class jerk stole it and took off running. I chased after him and he eventually threw my shoe down a hill into a field of tall grass and just looked at me with a huge grin. In a bad, stone-cold 1st grade timbre, I said, "Go find it," and shoved him down the hill into the grass after it. He started crying and we ran to the teacher. After explaining what happened, she made him go into the field and find my shoe. He crawled through the grass for about an hour before it finally turned up. Story 5. When I was about 13 or 14, there was this kid in the school bus who was about a year older than me and used to pick on me a lot. He was a total arrogant jerk. One time, he came and sat next to me and tried to pull the old, "Hey, did you know if your hand is bigger than your face, you have cancer?" Basically, the idea is to get the person to then hold their hand right against their face, and then you hit their hand, causing them to hit themselves in the face. I wasn't falling for it, so he put his hand against his own face in order to try and show me what to do. What did I do? Turned his own prank against him and smacked his hand into his face. His nose started bleeding quite badly. God, that felt good. Story 6. My parents told me that when I was 4 years old, my older sister had thrown my new toy truck over the fence intentionally. My dad said he then watched me go into the fridge, grab my sister's cup of juice, and mix it with ketchup, mayonnaise, salt, some banana that I'd chewed up already, and a whole lot of spit. After that, my dad told me I walked into her room and handed her the cup and said, "With the lisp I once had, I forgive you, sissy." Story 7. At my school, we had a guy who liked to stand next to his locker talking to one of his friends. and when someone got too close to it, he'd slam it open into their face. As there were no cameras near his hallway, it was always dismissed as an accident. Anyways, one day he felt the need to open it into my best friend's face. It gave him a bloody nose and almost broke it. Now, as I'm sure you all would be, I was pissed off. So the day my friend got back, the guy felt the need to approach him to apologize about hitting my friend. Luckily, my locker was located between my friend and the other guy. When I saw I could do it, I casually unlocked my locker, waited for him to get close to it, and slammed it into him. It broke his nose and dented the locker. Revenge is sweet. Story 8. When I was in junior high, I used to hang out with these dudes during PE class. Then they turned into They started bullying other kids, not participating in any of the activities, etc. I started getting in trouble just by hanging out with them, so I stopped. Of course, I was now They would do things like try to push me while running track, gang up on me in sports, etc. Well, one day, I opened up my lunch to find my dessert missing. This went on for days and I had no idea where it was going. I then saw one of the dudes eating it while laughing at the lunch table and shooting me knowing glances. I could have easily beaten this freak down, but I was never into physical violence. So I thought, and I schemed, and it hit me. Mondays were fine, Tuesdays were fine, Wednesdays were fine, Thursdays had a little surprise in them in the form of chocolate laxatives. While he was eating the brownie during lunch, I approached him. I told him I knew he was stealing my desserts and he should stop. "What are you going to do about it?" was his reply to the laughs of his little cronies. I turned around and walked away. We found ourselves in PE class a bit later that afternoon. It was time for calisthenics, jumping jacks, sit-ups, stretching, and "oh my god, what the hell?" was the scream from a girl a few rows over from me. This kid pooped so much his entire gym shorts were soaked with brown liquid. It was filling in his shoes. He tried to run out of the gym, but slipped in the liquid poop and got it all over his body and some on his face. For 2 weeks, he didn't come to school. While he was gone, the rumors started. Some said he died, some said he was pooping blood. None of those were true. He was so freaking embarrassed and he knew what he was coming back to. This happened in 7th grade. We parted ways after junior high when I went to private high school. However, I heard that the poop incident followed him through high school. No one would hang out with him. He was a social pariah. Now, keep in mind, I had no idea it would turn out like that. I figured he would get stomach cramps and diarrhea that night. I had no idea he would end up taking a poop bath in the middle of the gym in front of everyone. But I didn't regret it, and still don't. He was a piece of poop that deserved what he got. I'm not really sure if he suspected me or not. If he did, he never let on. Story 9. This kid had been picking on me since 1st grade. Then one day in 4th grade, the teacher had her back turned and he climbed under my table and started making faces at me. Not sure why, he was kind of weird. It must have been a knee-jerk reaction, but his face was there and my foot was there. So I kicked him in the face. The kid fell to the ground, shrieking while clutching his head. The teacher turned around and saw him out of his desk and gave him detention. Later that day, his face had swollen to the size of a volleyball, and he had stopped crying long enough to tell the teacher what had happened. My teacher asked me if it was true, and I said I felt something tugging on my shoe, so I kicked, thinking it was caught on something. The teacher gave me a lollipop, saying to be aware of my surroundings next time. The kid never bothered me again. Best day ever. Story 10. My Xbox Live account was stolen from me by some random person I didn't know. Not really sure how he did it. Maybe got lucky and guessed my password or something. But anyways, I woke up and tried signing on and it wasn't working. I tried recovering it and said my password was wrong. Went on my second account and said the stolen account was off of my friends list. Seemed as if my account had vanished into thin air. At the time, I was pretty big into Call of Duty World at War, and I was in the top 1,000 players for Search and Destroy. So I went into the leaderboards and eventually found my account with a different gamertag, and the friends deleted. So I called Xbox support and began a very long process to get my account back. Finally, a few weeks later, they got my email and password to the account and sent them to me, as I was the rightful owner of the account and had my parents' credit card on the account to prove it. So they sent me this kid's email and password he had put in my account. I went on Facebook and signed in using those credentials, and by God, it logged me into this freak's Facebook profile. I proceeded to like hundreds of homo pride pages. No offense to gay people. I was 15 at the time and this was the most insulting thing I could think of. Topped it all off by sending messages to at least 30 girls on his friends list, saying all sorts of messed up weird stuff, ranging from, "I'm gay and need someone to talk to about it," and changed his email and password to make it extra hard to get on and delete the stuff. Checked his page for a while after that and he deleted his Facebook within 2 hours. But I like to think that I messed his day up, and that makes me happy. Even though it was 3 weeks after he had taken my account, totally worth it. Story 11. When I was a young kid, around 6 years old, my brother stole my Game Boy Color and deleted my saved Pokemon games. I had worked really hard to catch all those Pokemon, so I was furious. Later, when my parents weren't home, I grabbed a butcher knife from the kitchen and chased him around the house until he locked himself in the bathroom. I put the blade of the knife under the door and slid it back and forth. He was screaming nonstop and started crying. After about an hour, I eventually stopped and let him out. I'm not sure why, but this question made me think back 20 years ago, and I felt extremely satisfied at the thought, so I thought I would share. Story 12. My boss had a falling out with her boss, and he, my boss's boss, decided he would destroy her and everything she cared about. This meant he was going to destroy me too, since my boss had done a lot to get me where I was. I didn't get fired or officially demoted, but I was moved a few layers deeper on an organizational chart and put into a job I used to do 4 years earlier. I got angry for 2 days, then polished my resume and sent it out across my large company. A month after it happened, I was flying across the country to interview for the most prestigious R&D organization in my industry. And 3 months after that, I was watching someone load my things into a moving van. The evildoer was fired 2 weeks after I started my new job, in the same company but a very different division. I never had to file a grievance. My silent determination to get out from under him was the loudest scream, and losing a very promising career made the company really look into him. Story 13. Not me, but my sister. My sister and I grew up in Kentucky, and after more than 20 years of living here, she decided she was ready for something new in life. So she made plans to move to Washington State. She made all the arrangements to move, packed all her things, etc. The only thing she didn't want to take were her 2 cats. She was just going to stay in someone's house until she could save more money after the move. So she left them with one of her coworkers, whom she had known or worked with for several years until she could come back and get them. Fast forward 6 months. My sister is living happily on the West Coast. A mutual friend of all of us, mine, my sister, her coworker, sees the said coworker where my sister worked with him. The friend asks how everything is going and how the cats are. While refusing to make eye contact, he tells her friend, one got out about a month ago, the other a week ago. Please don't tell, insert my sister's name here. So naturally, the first thing our friend does is call my sister to tell her. Obviously, her coworker hadn't said anything to my sister. My sister calls me, super upset because she, like a lot of Reddit, loves her cats and begs me to try and find them. The only option was to try the Humane Society, so I called another friend of ours to take me. We got to the Humane Society, searched the entire Lost and Found section, to no avail, so we searched the adoption center. It seemed completely hopeless, but by some strange and awesome universal force, I approached the last cage to find one of our cats. Curious as to how he found his way here, I asked the people working there, and they politely informed me that he was an owner give-up. When I asked the date he was taken in, they told me, and I figured out it was only 1 month after my sister had moved. So I re-adopted her cat, called her to tell her. She broke down in tears of joy, and I asked if she wanted me to do anything about it. The kind of thing a brother does when someone messes with their sister, to which she tells me, no, everything will work itself out. Fast forward another few months, and my sister has returned to Kentucky to pick up her cat. While in town, my sister, dad, and I all go out to eat a family breakfast. Halfway through our meal, I look over and see our old coworker sitting in a booth across from an attractive young lady. I tell my sister, and she instantly becomes furious. My dad tells her not to do anything, but I tell her she has to. So we give our dad a minute to leave, and as soon as he does, my sister grabs a plastic ketchup bottle, stands up, walks to his table, flips the can open, and sprays him up and down his face and shirt, giving him only time for his voice to crack, "Oh my God!" The entire restaurant had stopped what they were doing to watch all this go down, and everyone was completely silent, except the one guy in the back who couldn't stop laughing. My sister finishes spraying the ketchup, throws the bottle in his face, and just says, "Screw you, I know what you did." Now she's happily reunited with one of her cats. Story 14. On a plane, a guy in the seat in front of me, whom I had never met before, started up a conversation that went on for too long. At a certain point, he stood up on the aisle to get closer and continued to jabber on, while I tried to be polite and listen. He continued for so long that the flight attendant asked him to sit down since he was blocking her cart and drink service. He refused, saying he was talking to his friend, i.e. me. At the end of the flight, he asked the flight attendant for her name, which he provided. He then said he was going to report her to airline management and file a complaint about her being rude to customers, i.e. him. The shocked flight attendant asked him if he could get his name, saying it was only fair because he had hers. She asked him once or twice, then dropped it when the dude refused to identify himself. At the end of the flight, as passengers got off the plane, I fumbled with my luggage so as to not have to follow the dude immediately off the plane. I found the aggrieved flight attendant and handed her the dude business card, which he had tried to give me earlier. She seemed relieved. I felt profound satisfaction. Story 15. My now ex-wife was cheating on me and threw me and the kids out. We had to move 6 hours away, and when I drove back to get my and the kids' stuff, I caught her and her new boyfriend, well, she had sworn there was no one else. Yeah, right. I told her that when they left for work, I was taking everything in the house, and I did. right down to the broom and vacuum cleaner, which made it hard to clean the cigarette ash stains out of the carpet and all the broken glasses off the linoleum. Also, I peed in the milk. Story 16. My older sister was always verbally and physically abusive to me. One day, we got back from buying candy, and as we were walking, she said so much stuff that I lost my mind. I threw the open pack of Pop Rocks into her face. The moisture of her eyes started making the candy pop. Crying made it worse, but the icing on the cake was when she tried to flush it out with the garden hose, creating, what I imagine based on her screams, the most painful experience with candy ever. Story 17. I'd been dating a guy for a little over a year when he decided to leave me for this girl he'd been passing off as his best friend. I was always suspicious that there was something between them, but they both assured me there wasn't. I was heartbroken. I've never quite been the same after that. Anyway, I hooked up with his best friend. That was the first time I'd had a smile on my face in months because I knew it would hurt him, and it did. Also, the hookup was super hot. Story 18. In high school, a kid named Zach spread a lot of rumors that I was jealous of him, his life, and his girlfriend Emily. But I wasn't jealous. He was overweight, broke, and his girlfriend was uninteresting. Still, it annoyed me. Zach didn't know that I knew he was saying all this. So I started convincing him that a girl named Brittany liked him. Brittany was the go-to girl for every guy to like in my high school. Every guy wanted Brittany. After about 2 weeks of convincing him, he posted a bulletin in MySpace. This was a long time ago. About how he was unsure of his feelings with Emily and wanted to move on. Emily saw this and didn't appreciate it. The next day, she confronted him. He told her that he loved her, but she said no, and they broke up. Zach wasn't sad though. He still had Brittany. That night, I told him that I had been messing with him the entire time because of what he had done to me. He didn't believe me and asked Brittany out, but got rejected. He cried. He went from having 2 girls to 0 in hours. I won. Story 19. I was bullied in elementary school and punched in the stomach in the locker room, leaving no visible bruises. The bully had it down pat. One day after soccer practice, he hit me so hard in the head that I saw stars. But the coach did nothing and called it part of the game. I snapped. The soccer field was next to a rolling grassy hill that sloped down to the parking lot. So I grabbed the bully's wrist and we both leaped off the field in a double attempt. As we rolled down the hill, I could feel the little satisfying snaps from his arm and hear his little kid screams. It was so satisfying. However, I wasn't as smart in my revenge as the bully was in his abuse. I did it in front of a team of witnesses and got dragged to the principal's office. There, I was told that only animals behave like that. The bully had to wear a cast and sling, and since he was popular, he got plenty of sympathizers to sign it and all that. But it doesn't matter. I got my revenge, and best of all, he left me alone. Although he could now openly call me out as the spaz. My folks decided it was a good idea for me to switch schools after that year.
Frank Sinatra said, "The best revenge is massive success." What's a real-life example of this? Activision, believe it or not. In order to get the funds to fund the sale of the original Atari console, the founders of Atari sold shares of the company to Warner Communications, who treated their game programmers particularly badly. Treated only as engineers instead of game designers, Warner refused to pay bonuses to those who made higher-paying games, and refused to allow anyone to get credited for their work to avoid their competitors from making offers to poach them from Atari. It was also done to keep production costs to a minimum as per Warner's wishes. So in 1979, Atari spread around a memo in their offices as a form of brainstorming tactic to see what kind of games their staff should work on next, and for developers, David Crane, Larry Kaplan, Alan Miller, and Bob Whitehead were incredulous to see that they were treated as badly as everyone else in their 35-man team, despite solely being responsible for 60% of all profits for Atari for a number of years. They proceeded to leave the company and make themselves into some of the first third-party developers on the market, since all ports and releases for consoles were exclusively done internally beforehand, as well as the fact that none of the consoles had actual copy protection. Atari would take major financial losses due to mismanagement within the company, as well as other developers making cheaper games for the console without paying royalties to Atari, while Activision is now basically evil incarnate since Bobby Kotick bought it in 1991. Story 2. George Lucas got the ownership of the toy rights to Star Wars because they didn't think it would be successful. He made an absolute hit on those, not just the toy rights, he got the entire IP in exchange for waiving his salary. George Lucas himself thought the movie would be a massive flop and that it would be the end of his career, hence why Splinter of the Mind's Eye exists as the fake sequel to A New Hope. Lucas and Spielberg also made a bet that Star Wars wasn't going to be that successful. Lucas, on visiting the set to Close Encounters, He said, "Oh my God, your movie is going to be so much more successful than Star Wars. This is going to be the biggest hit of all time. I can't believe this set. I can't believe what you're getting, and oh my goodness." He said, "All right, I'll tell you what. I'll trade some points with you. You want to trade some points? I'll give you 2.5% of Star Wars if you give me 2.5% of Close Encounters." So I said, "Sure, I'll gamble with that. Great." Thus, Lucas has paid Spielberg ever since. Alec Guinness, thinking the whole thing was garbage, also agreed to do the movie, but he made one very unique request. He would only sign on if he was given a percentage of the film's gross revenues rather than being paid a flat fee, which made him a filthy rich man. And speaking of George Lucas, Lucas had long wanted to expand his Skywalker Ranch into a full-blown movie studio, and not just post-production facilities. But the neighbors blocked it at every turn, fearing it would ruin the neighborhood. So, a few years ago, Lucas said, "Screw it, I'll turn it into low-income housing instead." Now, if I remember correctly, the main four character stars were offered a one-off fee or royalty percentage. Only Alec Guinness took a percentage check, laughed as he went in his coffin, I'd imagine. Story 3. Frank Sinatra himself played this out more than once. When he worked with Tommy Dorsey, he wanted to break out and do more solo work. Dorsey refused to let him out of his contract, and when the dust settled, Sinatra went on to be a bigger name than Dorsey ever was. My favorite example is how his low-key feud with Marlon Brando, when On the Waterfront was in pre-production, the producers were looking at Brando for the role of Terry Malloy. Sinatra was also considered, and even when Brando refused it, he was basically given the unofficial nod that the part was his. But they were just stringing Sinatra along while they were trying to convince Brando. When Brando decided to accept, Sinatra had been reassured so often he was certain the role was his. When he was told the truth, he was upset but asked for the part of Father Barry, which had also been given to someone else. Years later, when Guys and Dolls was being cast, Sinatra wanted the role of Sky Masterson. Masterson is a lead, he was the most singing and gets the better songs. The producers wanted Gene Kelly for the part, and Sinatra had worked with him 3 times before, and they had a good relationship. But MGM wouldn't loan him out. The role of Sky Masterson went to Brando, and Sinatra was given the part of Nathan Detroit. Another kick for Sinatra was when the producers asked him to give Brando singing tips, which he flatly refused to do. One of Sky Masterson's biggest songs is Luck Be a Lady, and if you've never seen Brando's performance, I recommend you look it up because while it's not bad, he's clearly not a singer. Sinatra worked hard on the movie and it turned out well, but he also knew how to bide his time. Cut to 8 years later, Sinatra released of Luck Be a Lady, and not only did it become one of his signature songs, most people are shocked to find he doesn't sing it at all in the film. It might be a comparatively small victory, but an amusing one at least. Story 4. Been with my partner for 10 years. 10 years of gaslighting, being told that I'm forgetful, pathetic, and not going to ever be successful. My kids, not his, are now grown up, and at 50 I was diagnosed with ADHD and now being assessed for autism. That same year I achieved my master's degree and got myself medicated and worked hard with my kids to help them onto their life paths as they become adults. This was over the last couple of years. Little does my partner know that I'm about to kick his gaslighting narcissistic self out, and while I am now verging on poverty, having been manipulated to give up my career to support him and my kids, as he apparently couldn't take on any of the emotional or practical roles to assist, I can assure you, dear strangers, that in a year's time I will be successful and happier than I've ever been. Proving Sinatra right. Alright, I, among many others, would absolutely love an update in a year or so. We know you can do it, and I'd be happy to share that story. Story 5. When I bought my first home, my childhood, early teenage hood bully was working reception in the real estate lawyer's office. She definitely recognized me as soon as we made eye contact. Normally, I would not be okay with this, but my real estate lawyer was kind of a prick to her and was very bossy and rude with her, asking her to get us water, etc., while being very accommodating to me as a client. He kept calling her in the office to get whatever he and I needed while I signed some final paperwork on the day I took ownership of my house. There was a delay confirming something, so he made her do a quick Starbucks run for me while we waited. She made an error at one point and brought the wrong paperwork, and he gave her crap. It felt so good when she had to hand me my keys to my new house once everything was done. To smile and look her in the eyes while she handed me my keys with full confidence and assertion. While she was all frazzled and clearly embarrassed, I didn't acknowledge that I recognized her. I had an important meeting that morning and took the rest of the day off, so I looked really good that day too. It was summer and I was wearing a cream pleated skirt suit with the jacket folded over my arm. It was my best outfit and I felt boss AF. I will revel in that memory for the rest of my life. Story 6. Personal story. When I was a kid, during a mental evaluation, the person said I would only amount to being able to do simple jobs and not have any major career or future in life. Wouldn't be capable of doing anything intelligent or special. Joke's on him. I've worked in education and higher learning for 10 years, helping students get an education. I now work for one of the most prestigious universities in the world. I'm also a passionate advocate for mental health as I'm open about my mental health journey. A friend told me that because of me, he was inspired to see a therapist. That made me super happy. Living is just the best revenge, and I pay it forward to try to help others get employed at this university because they treat their employees well. To this dirt nozzle of a professional with his whack mental evaluation of me, I use that evaluation as fuel and I am successful for it, and I build up others so they can be successful too. Story 7. When I was at university, I had a friend who had a spare car parking space under his apartments, and as parking was difficult to find in the area, I asked if I could park there, and he said yes, so I did. For about a month until he told me to move it on Tuesday, tomorrow, as he was going to rent it out to someone else. I told him I wasn't around until Wednesday morning. We had some sort of text argument, but I literally said, "Thank you, I'll be happy to pay how much you want for the day, but I'm not physically back within 24 hours. Anyway, I got back Wednesday morning and I've got a flat tire. I was young, thought it was just an abnormal thing. So I pump it up and drive off, and while traveling at 60 miles per hour, lose the steering and nearly crash. Tire's flat again, it's got a puncture wound. He's clearly put a screwdriver through my tire, so an AA call out, and 150 pounds later, the tires change and I'm fuming. Cut to 6 months later, I didn't say anything to him. What's to say? And there's a party at his one-bedroom flat and I've been invited. Weird, but okay. We turn up, I'm enthusiastic to see him. Neither of us bring up the car. I feel like he thinks he got away with it, that I don't know it was him. I was told by a friend after the incident that he did do it. As the party was in full swing, I stole his microwave glass tray, his oven metal grill from inside the oven. I stole at least 4 left shoes. I took the power cable to his Wi-Fi router, and I took the plastic stopcock valve from inside his toilet cistern just before we left. It was a massively successful revenge. Apparently, he was complaining to mutual friends for months. I've never told anyone about it. I just nodded my head and said, "Oh, that's a shame." Ooh, savage. I love this one, and I'm definitely taking notes for future reference, just in case. And if you're enjoying the video so far, please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Now let's get back to the stories. Story 8. So my story, I dated a girl in college who seemed perfect, gorgeous, sweet, smart, really rich, and crazy under the sheets. After 2 years together and me basically becoming part of her family, she abruptly broke up with me and told me flat out that she couldn't see us together long term because she had a family and social network that would never accept her marrying someone outside of their social class. And I suspect racial group, I'm Hispanic and she was white. I never got that impression from anyone in her family or our friends group, so it was a complete shock, which I did not take well at the time. But as I was firmly in the group, I kept in contact with most of her family and by then joint social group. Very shortly after we broke up, she was dating a lacrosse player from our school who was the prototypical J. Crew model, tall, blonde, handsome, AF, and of course very well off. Our friends knew it was a bad breakup on my end and would always tell me how big of an idiot she was, but whatever, it just sucked for a while. Long story short, I struggled, but eventually moved on, graduated, and began my career, which started slow but ramped up after 5 to 7 years to the point where I was rubbing elbows with her dad and his social buddies on a frequent basis, and they were always totally cool with me. By then, she wanted me back, but by that time I was engaged to my now wife, and it was a complete non-starter. All in all, that was 18 years ago. I am now quite successful, both in career and finances. Married with 2 great kids, and she's a 2-time divorcee who desperately wants kids but can't have them. Termination complications from said J. Crew relationship, and struggles financially while living at home. When she came crawling back, it certainly felt like revenge to turn her down, but at this point, it's more me feeling bad that she never found happiness, or at least not yet. We're in our early 40s now. Story 9. Michael J. Fox has a great story about when he started out. Some bigwheel at the network didn't like him for the role of Alex P. Keaton on Family Ties. He was too short, not cute, not heartthrob enough. You're never going to see his face on a lunchbox. But the producer cast him anyway, and the show shot to #1 and stayed there. Fox sent him a Family Ties lunchbox with his face on it, and then Back to the Future 1, 2, 3 lunchboxes. Reminds me of the story Harrison Ford used to tell on talk shows. When Ford was just starting out and looking for an agent, one agent told him that he'd never make it because Ford lacked an indefinable movie star quality. "Look at Tony Curtis," said the agent. In his first role, he played a grocery delivery boy. As soon as he walked on camera, people said, "Now that's a movie star." To which Ford retorted, "I thought the point of acting was to make people say, 'Now that's a grocery delivery boy.'" After he made it as one of the world's biggest movie stars, Ford was out dining one night when the waiter slipped him a business card and a note. The business card was from the agent who turned down Ford all those years ago, and the note read, "I would be honored if you would join me for dinner." Ford crumpled up the note and tossed it aside. Sylvester Stallone as well. Casting agents told him he was too stupid-looking and he'd only get small roles as the thug who got beaten up. He said he literally went to every casting agent in New York City and got rejected by all of them. Even after he wrote Rocky and found producers, they didn't want him to star in it. Stallone famously said he would bury the Rocky script and let the worms eat it before he let James Caan star. My related fun fact to everyone who thinks Stallone is an idiot is that he wrote a script that won Best Picture. Is Rocky my favorite movie? No. Do I have mad respect still for Stallone for both writing and starring in it when he had nothing at the time? Heck yeah. Story 10. Aaron French, chef owner of restaurant The Lost Kitchen in rural Maine, co-owned a restaurant in the town of Belfast with her husband. A very tumultuous relationship ended with him changing the locks on the building with all of her equipment inside. She licked her wounds, leased space in an old mill building in her tiny hometown of Freedom, and built from the ground up one of the best restaurants in the country, with a coveted reservation that is fabled for its difficulty to get a table. Has her own multi-season documentary on TV and is absolutely dominating in the culinary world right now. I love her book, Finding Freedom. Her memoir does a great job characterizing the whole situation. She is honest about her faults in life, but is candid about her pride of rebuilding to such success. I was fortunate enough to catch her on my radar during the ascent. She had just landed a cover feature in Maine magazine, and a local interview shortly thereafter is a perfect summary of this. She said something to the effect of, "Oh, if I could only see my ex's face when he catches this." She was still gaining popularity, but it was still a time when she would book out a full year of reservations within a couple days in the spring. On the next year's reservation day, we called, not knowing that so did 10,000 other people. Their voicemail was jammed for days, but we were able to get a dinner reservation for our anniversary. It was above and beyond an enchanting and exceptional experience, but the newfound fame made the old call-in system impossible from then on. Now, the place is so popular you have to mail in a physical postcard, old school style, and it's a lottery-type drawing for reservations. We got pulled for another res in 2023, but haven't gotten lucky since. Last I recall, she gets something like 40,000 postcards within a 2-week span every April. Now, this is for a place with 40 seats, 1 seating per night, 4 nights a week from May to November. Story 11. Sony and Nintendo were working on a console together before the N64 came out, intending to utilize Nintendo's gaming hardware combined with Sony's sound tech to create games with more immersive sound capabilities than have been seen before. Partway through development and immediately following Sony's announcement of their partnership, Nintendo backed out of the deal, which, if you're not aware of Japanese business etiquette, is kind of a jerk move. Nintendo backed out to work with Philips to put Nintendo games on the CDI, which resulted in the worst received Nintendo games of all time. Sony, out of spite, went on to make the PlayStation, one of the best-selling consoles in gaming history, and cement themselves as a massive player in the console wars to this day. They had so much potential too, but Nintendo, being Nintendo, will always screw with people. That's partially why Final Fantasy VII has such a vast difference in graphic quality between beginning and end. Early part was made compatible with Nintendo software, later stuff was made compatible with PlayStation. Before the N64 came out, it was a lot harsher. Nintendo made the announcement that they were working with Philips the day after Sony said they were working with Nintendo. So, Nintendo didn't want to put their games on the CDI. What really happened was they screwed Sony over and at the last minute started working with Philips. Well, Sony was screwed because there was no official deal in place. Philips didn't make the same mistake. Philips instead said breach of contract when Nintendo tried to back out, so Nintendo was required to let Philips make those horrible games. Basically, Nintendo got what they deserved on that one. Oh yeah, that's even funnier. Nintendo tried to screw over two companies, but the second one became smart and made sure they couldn't back out of that deal. Story 12. I'm not a fan of most sports, but I do know of one immersive NFL draft story. But to give a basic explanation on how the NFL draft works, each year, all 32 NFL teams get the opportunity to recruit new players. The order in which teams get to choose in each round are based on the reversed order in which the team placed in the previous season. So, if, for example, the Buffalo Bills finished last in the 2022 season, they would be the first to choose a new player each round in the 2023 NFL Draft. It's believed that this is a good way to keep things fair in the spirit of competition. It gets a little bit more complicated when teams can trade positions for other players, but you get the idea, hopefully. There are usually 7 or 8 rounds in total, so 32 teams multiplied by 8 rounds means that a total of 256 players could be drafted overall. In the 2000 NFL Draft, there were a total of 254 players picked. With the explanation above, you'd figure that the later the player is chosen by a team overall, the lesser and lower the expectations for that player are. So the 199th overall draft pick isn't somebody you'd expect to make a name for themselves in the NFL. Little did anyone suspect that that year's 199th pick would become the starting quarterback in his second season, and the team's primary starter quarterback for 18 consecutive seasons. Finally, when this player officially retired on February 1st, 2023, he was the last active player out of the entire 254 players picked in the 2000 NFL Draft. That man was Tom Brady. Now, I'm not going into detail about how many records Tom Brady has set, tied, or broken for a quarterback, single player, a franchise, a season, a division, a conference, and for the entirety of the NFL. It's like I said, I'm not a big sports fan, so I can't really convey the significances of them. And I know that Tom Brady is the most controversial player in modern-day NFL and one of, if not the most, in NFL history.
What revenge of yours hit the victim way worse than you thought it would? To the point you said, maybe I shouldn't have done that. I'm still mad at myself for this. When I was a preteen, my friend and I went to one of those day camps that picked us up in yellow school buses. One of the other kids in our bus was a younger boy I'll refer to as Eli. Eli was a freaking terror. He would scream, make a mess, and be as annoying and insufferable as possible. Riding the bus with him was a nightmare for everyone involved, most of the time. So I came up with this idea. I found his family in the phone book and called up pretending to be a camp counselor. I told his mom that he was misbehaving on the bus and that he would either be disciplined or kicked out of the camp if he didn't stop. She bought it. She said she would talk to him about it. I felt so freaking smart. Until the next day when a quiet, sullen Eli showed up with a black eye. Well, he should have called CPS instead. Story 2. Coworker and I had a friendly prank war spanning 2 years. Close to the end of our war, he iced my car. Icing involves taking the hose to the parking lot every half hour and spraying a light mist over your victim's car when it's below 0 out. I finished my 12-hour shift to find a car encased in 2 inches of ice. My revenge was, I thought, both more inconvenient for him and less freezing for me. I decided to take a bedsheet, drape it over his car, and only took 4 or 5 trips out with a hose the next night. So the next morning, he finds his car with a 1/4 inch of ice freezing a sheet to his car. When he started peeling off the sheet, he pulled his windshield wipers, arms and all, off of his ratty Jeep. I got a very angry phone call. I felt bad. The unwritten rule was embarrassing or inconvenient, no damage. I paid for repairs and he got his revenge. He planted a dozen pieces of smoked herring throughout my car. It took me 6 months to find the last piece, hidden under the carpet under the back window of my car. I can still smell it. I don't even own the car anymore. Story 3. When I was little, my friends kept pointing at the little girl in the box of the board game Operation and saying it looked like me. So I pointed at the big fat guy and said, "That's your mom," and didn't realize she was behind me. Story 4. I don't know what it was, but a lot of the boys in my 6th grade class thought it was hilarious to try and trip people. They'd get your back no matter how careful you were. Well, I was pretty good at avoiding it, but when I was in gym class, this kid named Joey got my back hard. I was dribbling down court and he nailed me. My face planted hard. So I thought about how to get him. And I got him at lunch. He was holding a lunch tray, so his hands weren't as useful. He nailed a table and lost a tooth. I got suspended for 10 days and a strict no tripping policy got implemented. Immediate suspensions if caught. Story 5. This one is not as serious or entertaining as most of the answers you'll find here. But when we were kids, my sister threw water at me and ran away, so I picked up my glass of water and ran after her. I threw the water from the glass at her once I had her cornered. Unfortunately, the glass had slipped out of my hand and it hit her right across her face. She got bruised pretty badly. Story 6. I had a big group of friends from 13 to 18 when we were 17. One of them stole my girlfriend. To be fair, he legitimately knew we were going out. He got her intoxicated and fooled with her at a party. He knew I'd find out. Said to my face he didn't care. Tough crap, mate. It was her fault as well, of course. She wasn't passed out or anything like that. She'd been leading him on and was sober enough to consent, if intoxicated enough to get over the social stigma of actually doing it. So from that point on, our group of friends just cut this guy out of our circle. We stopped inviting him to stuff. He tried to hang out. We told him to screw off. Mates that had been friends with him since primary school just ignored him. Initially, I was super proud of this show of solidarity for my bros. My best mate was actually dating my now girlfriend's best mate, and he split up with her because of her attitude about the whole thing, trying to defend her friend to him and make him hang out with him. So, first summer back from uni, we're all 19 to 20. We see him in a local pub. I don't know what to do. Decide to try and be cool about it and go up to say hi. He tells me to screw off. I guess he blames me for all his friends cutting him out of his life. I don't get the chance to explain that I in no way asked them to do that. They just did what they saw as the right thing. 2 weeks later, we're in the same pub, and I see his younger sister. She's 17 now, very, very attractive. I start a conversation with her about her brother and how I feel bad about what we did. She says that it did really hurt him, but he's got some new friends now, mostly from uni and is still with my ex, despite a long-distance relationship over the uni semesters. He won't talk to any of us old friends, though, which I think is a genuine shame. He's known some of the guys since we were 5. One drink leads to another with this girl, and we end up back at her house. Her parents are away, her brother is staying in my ex's flat. She has her own flat. Didn't go to uni, got a job. So, empty house. We end up fooling around. Next morning, her bro calls round just as I'm leaving. The look on his face as he works out what's happened. He goes from utter despair to absolutely mental in about half a second. Eventually, I just had to leave. His sister finally managed to explain to him that it was nothing to do with revenge or anything, and that I was genuinely sorry for how we treated him. I don't know if she told him the whole conversation we had about how I'd feel bad as I didn't want to upset him anymore, and she convinced me to come back to hers by saying she was her own woman, could make her own decisions, and he wasn't due to be home at any time. If he hadn't randomly turned up, I hope he'd have never known. He still won't accept my Facebook friend request, though. It would be better if he had said, tough crap, mate. Story 7. I guess revenge implies thinking out the act or some time between acts. But at the age of 14, I was rolling up the hose in my backyard with a friend since my mother told me to. The 2 girls next door were playing in their backyard and came over to talk. One 12 or so, the other around 7. The 12-year-old happened to be standing on the hose and I asked her to move. She did not. I pulled the hose hard enough to make her fall over. At this point, the 7-year-old screamed and ran right at me and bit me. She was not letting go. I could see my shirt stain. I grabbed her head and tried to pull her away, but nothing. So I just full-on punched her. I was or am not proud of this, but it had to be done. What was worse is that the house was owned by a local church where I happened to go to Boy Scouts. Everyone quickly knew I had punched a 7-year-old and given her a black eye, but no one cared why. Story 8. I was 11. My older brother was 16. We would fight and argue, but one time I was running up the stairs away from him and he whipped the back of my legs with a long rubber chew toy. It left a pretty big figure-8 shaped welt on my legs. I knew he was faster and stronger than me, and I knew if I tried to attack him, he'd stop me. So I grabbed a flathead screwdriver and held it over the stove until it was red hot. I ran up to him and very openly went to harm him, knowing he'd stop me. He grabbed my wrist to stop my thrust. As anticipated, I pushed the red-hot head of it into his forearm as hard as I could. Man, I was crazy as a kid. Sorry, Mike. Story 9. I had a neighbor yell at my younger brother about his weight, and I took it extra personal. Didn't know how to get him back without getting caught. Then I figured out I could place nails just under the back of the tire, so when he pulled out of the driveway, he'd run over them. Turns out he was super poor and couldn't afford the repairs. My dad had to carpool with him to work for a month or so. I've never told anyone. Story 10. When I was about 7 or 8, there was this girl in my school that was absolutely horrible. We'll call her Cindy. Cindy would run up to you and pull your hair out, steal the toy you were playing with, eat your snack at snack time, etc. In other words, she was a real witch. One day, as we were finishing up recess in the playground, she came up to me, pulled my hair, and took some with it. That was the last straw. As the teacher was gathering everyone inside and wasn't looking our way, I grabbed Cindy by her pigtail and dragged her over to the playground. Now, this playground was built weirdly with a sort of enclosed area in the middle of 3 bridges that formed a triangle that you couldn't get out of. Sometimes, us bigger kids would jump in there during hide and seek and climb out later, but Cindy couldn't because she was shorter. So I picked her up and threw her down in there and left to go back inside. It wasn't until about an hour later when the teacher realized that Cindy wasn't in class. I didn't say where she was, and it took them another half hour to find her. I got in trouble and had to spend the next week in the principal's office. I lost my Game Boy for a month. But Cindy never messed with me again. Story 11. Way back in elementary school, a friend threw a piece of chalk that hit me square in the forehead. It was the most humiliating moment for younger me, as everyone who saw that started laughing their backs off. Kids are mean. I plotted and planned my revenge to get back in the exact same fashion over the next couple of days. One fine day, weapon in hand, I found him perfectly placed to chalk throw away from me. I yell out his name and quickly launch the projectile. He spins around. For some reason, he had his mouth open as he looked at me, and the piece of chalk flew directly. His eyes widened and he starts choking. I stood frozen in shock as he fell on his knees, coughing. Luckily, somebody grabbed him from behind and thumped his back, so he swallowed the piece. An adult walks in, cannot remember who it was at the time, but she looks at me and asks what happened. At this point, I'm shaking, realizing that I narrowly ended my friend. I say it wasn't meant. My friend, also shaken at this point, laughs it off, saying it went straight into his throat and he didn't taste it. The adult shakes her head and says next time, just hand it like a normal person, and walks away. Years later, when we were moving away to another country, I reminded him about the incident and came clean about the whole thing. He snaps and yells, "I knew it!" Story 12. 2 days ago, actually. In my football, I know, game, this one clumsy defender kept catching my ankles seconds after I would pass the ball away. One play, he was clearing the ball and I just wanted to lay the kid out. As he was on his plant foot swinging, I hit him with my shoulder hard, and as he was falling, he grabbed me and took me down with him. I landed on his arm and it snapped like a twig. I feel awful. Story 13. High school. Now, this poor kid I used to work with at Wendy's, Kevin, he was a juvenile delinquent. He was a few years older than me, a little bit bigger than me, had nasty tattoos on his neck, and supposedly was out of jail on work release. He tried to be a tough guy and pester me whenever we worked together. Stuff like generally talking smack unprovoked, getting real close up in my face, and that stands where you puff out your chest and pull your arms back like you're gonna swing. The most irritating thing was when he would walk right up in my face, then flinch like he was gonna throw a punch at me, and just laugh and say some rude crap. I got along with just about everyone at work, and he did, somewhat, but we just did not fit together. One day the exchanges between us were so apparent and obviously stressed, everyone working was talking about me fighting him. I dispelled these rumors as I wanted to keep my job, but my destiny on this day said otherwise. First was the back door incident. The store had a large back door with a peephole in it, and it could only be opened from the inside. There was a buzzer outside that employees would push if they wanted back in. Well, Kevin was locked outside and his patience while awaiting his re-entry had run out. Instead of tapping the buzzer, this guy was mashing it and holding it down while everyone inside went crazy. We were all busy and I was running to the back to grab some heavy boxes. Holding these boxes, I was going to open the back door while it walked past. I tried to push on the door, but it wouldn't open. I leaned into it, but couldn't push much more because of the boxes I was holding. I was in a hurry, so I yelled, "Get back, I'm going to kick the door." He did not hear me over the loud, constant buzzing. I gave that door a swift, "This is Sparta!" kick, and it opened about 3 inches, then bounced closed again. What the heck? I kicked it again, and it opened, revealing a bashed and somewhat upset Kevin. He had been trying to look in the peephole when I kicked the door. I had just broken the crap out of his nose. He was mad. Immediately, I started apologizing and backing away from him, but he came at me like a rabid monkey. Quickly, we were surrounded by employees and separated. I was told to go up front and manage fries and to not come into the back of the part of the store until Kevin left for the hospital. Then the final event. Less than 10 minutes later, I was working with fries, which entails grabbing a metal basket out of boiling hot oil and dumping the fresh fries into an adjacent tray. I was doing this, and everyone around me was talking about how I just broke Kevin's face. On his way leaving our store for the hospital, he decided to come right up to me again and try to instigate a fight while I was dumping some fresh fries. Kevin pulled a signature move while flinching at me like he was going to throw a punch. I retaliated by returning my own flinch for the basket I was holding. I didn't actually hit him with an incredibly hot fry basket, but I forgot about the boiling hot oil still clinging to the basket. When I flinched at him and shook the basket, tiny flaming hot drops of grease splattered on his face and neck. I had just broken his nose on accident, then threw boiling hot oil in his face on accident. Instant fight. On the ground. I'm a wrestler, so his freshly broken and burned nose was just smashed and wiped across the dirty floor for a few seconds before it was broken up. He was an absolute mess. He left for the hospital. I got sent home. That was it. No charges.
No questions from managers after, no more being scheduled with Kevin, not even any paperwork about 2 vicious assaults and fights in the same day. I felt really bad, but simultaneously kinda justified. Both incidents were honest accidents, which could have easily been avoided if you weren't such a schmuck. I still felt like the outcome was worse than reasonable. Story 14. I had a girlfriend cheat on me. Lie about it when I confronted her and gave her the chance to come clean and work through it, and stalked me after I broke up with her. We were quite young, so it was all very over-dramatic. But I did love her a lot and was hurt by what she did. At the same time, I was very done and not interested in reconciling. She didn't get the hint. I asked her nicely many times, then not so nicely, and demanded she screw off. She would, for a while, but then she'd show up intoxicated and try to pick fights, insult me, and be sincerely hurtful. I eventually had enough, as you do. I told a couple of choice people in her school, different to mine, what she'd done. Thought she'd get dragged for it, and that would be that. Well, turns out she was a witch in all other aspects of her life, too. Apparently, she was loathed at school. People jumped on the snooze like starving beasts and fresh meat. I had texts and IMs from people I didn't even know asking to confirm the news, which I ignored because I was really done with the whole situation by now. I eventually heard from other friends at that school that people had not let it drop and had even stuck posters around the school with pictures of her, announcing what she'd done, offering her services with her phone number, photoshopping bananas into her, etc. It was brutal. And she had to change schools in her final year. I did feel a bit bad. If I'd known it would go that far, I might have rethought telling those people. At the same time, she hurt me badly. She refused to leave me alone despite months of chances, and the other students reacted so viciously because apparently she was a total schmuck to everyone in the school, so I don't know. I sure as heck didn't expect that, though. Story 15. Some girl hit my car in a hit and run. There was a witness to the crime, so the police were able to track her down. I was asked if I wanted to press charges. I went for it. Turns out she had no license or insurance. She kept trying to fight the charges, but wound up getting sued by my insurance, having to pay me restitution via the court system and 4 separate charges between all her crimes, all of which included a decent fine. She was some 18-year-old single mom. I felt super bad by the end of it. Story 16. Million years ago, I worked in a large clothing store. This one girl I worked with would slap you on the back or pinch your arm or whatever as if it was a friendly gesture. It hurt. I don't know if she was pretending to be nice or was simply stupid, but it was very unwelcome, and I imagine it told her so, but honestly don't remember anymore. What I do remember is one day I'm heading up to the escalator and there she is ahead of me. So I walk up, and as I'm going past her, I give her hardest, friendly slap on the back I could. I may have gone a little overboard as she almost fell forward and definitely gasped in surprise. I don't think she ever came within arm's reach of me again. Story 17. My best friend slept with my son's father while I was pregnant. Then she got on substances and went to prison. I found out. I'd been helping her mother care for her daughters, writing to her each week, visiting her twice a week, putting money on her books, everything. I wrote to her, told her what I had found out, and then cut all contact. The only thing I continued to do was help care for her daughters. I cut off all emotional support when she needed it the most, even when she was transferred into the federal system and went states away. Returned all letters, refused all phone calls. She was released a year or so ago. I did not pick her up as originally planned. When she showed up at my house to collect her daughters, they were afraid of her. Now, I feel like I may have been mean. She wasn't thinking properly when she decided to sleep with my son's father, and I wasn't a very good friend when it counted. Either way, we're on speaking terms again, but I keep her at arm's length. We mostly just communicate for her children's sake. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 18. During a rough patch with my now ex-fiancé, he admitted to me that he had been cheating on me and was involved with someone else. At the time, he was the general manager of a company that was being sold, but none of the employees knew as the company needed to be up and operating through the sale, at which time everyone would be out of a job, including him. But he was getting some big money for his efforts. So when he came clean about the cheating, I went out and got intoxicated with a friend. Came home that night and called everyone's voicemail and left a message with the details of what was happening to their jobs in the company. It was a complete mutiny the next day. If he was the only one getting the golden parachute and the endgame was, surprise, you're fired, I feel that she did the right thing regardless of his cheating. Story 19. So once at a party, the guy working the grill at the snack bar across the street from us, who I don't know all that well but often joke around with, stood in the center of the room and announced that he got a new job. And I immediately quipped from the back of the room, "You flipping burgers at Burger King now?" And the whole room exploded with laughter. I felt like a schmuck immediately. I didn't expect the reaction. It wasn't even that funny. It was bad enough that I interrupted his moment, but I just expected him to laugh and shoot a joke back my way as usual. I still cringe when I think about it, and how his face dropped after waiting around uncomfortably for the whole thing to go down. He was a cool guy. I apologized and everything afterwards, but we never joked anymore, and he started avoiding me not too long after. I still feel bad about that. Story 20. When I was in nursery, preschool, a kid used to constantly pester me, take toys off me, etc. One day, outside in the garden, he stole a toy tractor I was riding on. He stood up on the seat and stuck his tongue out at me. Age 4 me had finally been broken. I ran and kicked the tractor, which jolted it forward. He subsequently fell off and rolled down a hill into some stingy nettles and got some pretty bad cuts and bruises. I remember thinking right then and there, wow, I really didn't need to do that, but that little part of me felt great. Story 21. I had a homophobic teacher assistant. One day, me and my friend are messing around. We've been close, not love each other close, but calling each other love and darling was a normal greeting. Messing around, she sneered at us and said, "That's not right. Men shouldn't be like that to each other. God doesn't condone it." Or something to that effect. I can't remember the exact words. While my friend happened to be gay and offended, I happened to be fairly camp and wanted to make a joke out of it to try and defuse the situation. Only this treatment continued and we got treated like dog crap by this person. So we did the logical thing. We made posters and created a homosexual club, handed out leaflets and put the posters everywhere. When we handed her leaflet, she was in front of a lot of people and simply refused to come. We found it funny as heck, because screw this witch. And the principal came around because he was interested in the club and the leaflet. Oh, and because there was a clause written in small writing that said, "We reserve the right to tell homophobic people to screw off." We explained the situation to him and he warned us that he would look into it. End of the week, we found out that this teacher assistant had not only been fired, but barred from working in any school again. A teacher, as it turns out, was battling for the other side, and he had already reported this behavior to the principal in the past, just that they needed more proof. I felt really bad over the weekend. I made a woman lose her job in her profession. Then on Monday, I came in and every single teacher had a copy of my leaflet and was laughing their backs off, so the regret slowly wore off. Story 22. I was living in a house with 5 other people in college and ended up dating one of the girls for 6 months. I come home one day and she's showing some guy around her house who's her tutor. A month later, she dumped me and it's this tutor who she's dating instead. I can hear them cooing to each other, kissing. It's driving me insane. Never date a roommate, by the way. Every time I go to the bathroom, I see his toothbrush there. So in that state of mind, I decided the best revenge would be to take his toothbrush and scrub the toilet with it. And I did this multiple times over the course of a couple months. At the time, it felt like justice. Now it seems super childish, and although I don't know if he ever got sick, I'm worried what my actions may have caused. Besides, it was her I should have been mad at, and not this guy who probably had no clue. Story 23. I removed the batteries from a friend's air conditioner controller as a joke once and forgot about it. I then got a phone call from my friend a few days later asking me if I did it. I finally fessed up, and it turned out her mom had called the aircon company demanding they come out and fix the air conditioner since it wasn't turning on, until they asked her to check the batteries, which weren't there. Story 24. I was jealous of a kid in my senior year creative writing class, high school. We had to submit weekly fiction pieces, and everyone in class would read each other's stories and discuss in class. This guy never wrote his own pieces. He actually had the guts to submit short stories he found online. Our teacher was not technologically savvy and way too trusting of his students, so it was never obvious to him. The kid received glowing praise every week in class, and it infuriated a lot of people to sit there and watch the teacher gush over this fraud. I finally decided to do something and snitched. He was nailed for cheating and failed the class, resulting in a failing grade for his English requirement. This was problematic for him because he had applied early decision to one school and it was now late into senior year when he could no longer apply to schools. Because of a failing grade, this crushed his GPA and somehow the university was also aware of the cheating. They reversed their admittance and he had to spend a year at home. During that year at home, when he otherwise would have been at school, he was hit by a car and is now paralyzed. Story 25. Last year I was driving on the service road. Not all states have them, but they run alongside a highway and allow drivers to get on and off them. I was driving 50 miles per hour, the speed limit, when some schmuck came flying up behind me going at least 70 miles per hour. Instead of going around me, he gets right up on my tail, puts on his high beams, and honks his horn. I wasn't going to go any faster for their sake, but my turn was coming up anyways. I made sure to take the turn slow enough to pass them off. Lucky enough, they were making the same turn. When he got in the other lane to finally pass me, I sped up and acted like I wasn't going to let him pass. Of course, they sped up very quickly and I left off my gas. What they didn't know was that there was a major dip in the road coming up. They hit at full speed and came about 1 foot off the ground. When they landed, I saw sparks and their bumper was hanging off as they pulled over. I feel bad for baiting them into that because someone could have been seriously hurt, but at least the schmuck learned their lesson. Story 26. When I was younger, my sister, practically best mates now, was the most annoying little crap. Hypocrites in arguments, always got her way, didn't listen, etc. One day I'm watching TV and she grabs the remote and changes it. Says a load of crap, so next to the bed, TV was in a spare room for us, there was a load of plugs. I unplugged one and swung with all my 10-year-old force into her ankle and told her to stop being annoying. She fully cried and fully bruised her ankle for like a week. I felt so bad because I thought it would be like hitting her with a ruler type of pain. By the way, we live in the UK, so those plugs are heavy and have 3 teeth. Story 27. I had a really bad teacher in middle school. Like, he would teach us skip over most of the lesson and tell all of us how dumb we were for not having a clue how to complete the assignments. It was unnecessarily mean. Wouldn't answer questions about what he was teaching and also was really creepy around the girls. I don't really remember what the final straw was, but we decided to mess his truck up one day. We got a funnel and dumped a crap load of sugar in his gas tank. What we didn't know was his wife was pregnant with her second child, and the financial burden of buying a replacement vehicle and a teacher's salary caused them to lose their home. Story 28. In high school, I had this shrew of a biology teacher. She exploded in anger for no apparent reason. Gave detention like it was nothing. We hated her. Part of biology was intimacy education, and she explained it using the flowers and bees method. Suddenly, she went on sick leave for a couple of weeks, but eventually came back. After some time, we learned that she had a miscarriage. We immediately knew this was our way of prepubescent payback. Every biology class, the whole class, and I, somewhat upfront, asked if she could explain the flowers and the bees again. After a couple of times, she snapped, started crying, stormed out of the classroom never to be seen again. Immediately, we realized we went way too far. I eventually heard she quit teaching altogether and even was institutionalized for some time. Even 25 years later, it makes me feel bad. Story 29. Got a coworker fired for incompetence. A manager wouldn't do it, so I saved up 3 months of failures, just documenting them all. I then took this to my director and got the woman fired. She was very unqualified for the position we held and was an absolute schmuck most days. She posted all sorts of crap about being an independent woman, how she was proud that she was able to support her 2 fatherless kids. She would often say things like, "If we didn't have a woman in this office, nothing would ever get done," after doing something like changing the paper towel roll in the break room, which, of course, was something our cleaning staff was already paid to do. She just liked to do things she was actually capable of. One time, she was supposed to give a presentation at a hotel conference room and made it all the way past hooking up her laptop to the projector before she realized she didn't have the file on that laptop. It was only saved locally on her desktop in her office. You'd think we could just remote into it and grab the file? No. She's one of those schmucks who turns her enterprise workstation off. It was super embarrassing for a company. She was my Uber driver last week. Story 30. When I first became an electrician, an older journeyman decided to teach me not to leave my stuff laying around by taking 50-plus small zip ties and encasing my lineman's pliers or clines. He was also trying to tell me I needed to buy some dikes or diagonal cutters. A tin auger saw all of this go down and quietly gave me a very long, heavy-duty zip tie and suggested I put it on his truck's drive shaft so he'd spend time looking for the noise. The older journeyman didn't show up for 2 days after I put the zip tie on because his truck broke down on the way home. Apparently, the zip tie got hung up in his drive shaft, transmission yoke, pillow block, differential yoke, all got destroyed, which also took out the exhaust system just after the headers, and he managed to crack the fiberglass dual fender on the passenger side. Ended up buying a new truck shortly after that, and I never told him about the zip tie. Story 31. In high school, would be late elementary in the US, I guess, there was this kid who wasn't unpopular per se, but a little awkward. Last day before the summer holidays, he plays with us during the morning break. Things got a little rough, and there's some light wrestling involved. Nothing too serious. No one got hurt, except some red ears. But the kid turned out not to be the silverback of our schoolyard. We walked back into class and continued the day as any other. Get on the bus home. They still being a little sour with the rest. Start enjoying our summer holidays. Yay. A week later, my dad summons me into his study, fuming and enraged. He got a letter from the kid's dad, according to which I'd beaten the boy up so badly that he came home sniveling. According to the letter, he was in so much pain that he could barely walk. The letter laid out in detail how the boy would not be able to enjoy the family we're going on the first day of summer despite his grave injuries. I was expected to better come up with one hell of an injury because otherwise we'd get fire and fury from the police and the lawyers. After some frantic back and forth shouting, my father eventually believed me that I didn't, in fact, roughen the guy up. My father wrote a conciliatory letter to try to work out what precisely had happened. The other family wasn't having that, though, and began collecting statements from witnesses. Turns out that several teachers stated in writing that the kid appeared to be completely fine throughout the entire day, did not appear to be in distress or pain, and had interacted with him and other students completely normal. Whoopsie. The other family concluded that there had been a misunderstanding. I was pretty mad at the guy because I seriously was expecting to get roughened up badly at home and be in a ton of trouble had this gone otherwise. So once school started, I waited until our entire male class was assembled and then told the story with appropriate snark to the rest of the class. Nasty snitch move. From that moment on, that kid spent years at the bottom of the hierarchy and was the back of every joke for a long time. That time must have been really crap for him. I regret that deeply, because the kid was actually genuinely nice, if a little awkward, and grew up to be a pretty decent adult. And to his credit, once school started, he came to me and tried to explain the situation to me. The gist was that it were his overprotective parents who were the real trouble, not him. But I was so mad because I could have gotten into so much trouble over nothing, just out of someone else's spite. But during the entire summer, I hadn't even gotten an apology or any admission of wrongdoing and was left doubting myself. There was also no attempt by the parents at getting us to talk to one another. That's deeply regrettable. I wish someone clever had helped us talk through that situation. Story 32. In my middle school, we had this thing called corn dogging, or something which involved just kneeing people in the back when they weren't looking. Anyway, in 7th grade, I was at my locker about to get my lunch when these two kids approached me. The one, Evan, told his crony dude to corn dog me if I turned around to get my lunch. Evan had a locker to the bottom left of me, so he was getting his lunch while his bud watched me. I've been doing this to me for months, so finally I had enough and decided to kick the crap out of the locker to try and get him away from me. It hit him right above the eye and he started screaming in pain. Me, being like 13, freaked out and didn't know what to do, so I just went to lunch. Got called to the principal's office like 5 minutes later and we both got detention. Story 33. Junior year in high school. We gathered at a friend's house to play some D&D. Someone had brought a 2-liter cola bottle that had been filled with tequila. We had mostly ignored the alcohol and focused more on the game. All but one of us had kept our drinking reasonable. One guy had decided to get completely sloshed. He was stumbling around, being obnoxious, and making lots of rackets. Friend's mom was in her room, and then he started retching. We took him outside, but he kept coming back into the house and retching up on the carpet. He had finally had enough of his crap and decided to take him home. We loaded him into the back of my friend's pickup and took him to his house. It was late, and his parents were asleep. He opened the door, and we pushed him in. You could see him kind of stumbling across the living room through the front window. One of my friends was like, "You know what? Screw him," and started ringing the doorbell and pounding on the front door. Our intoxicated friend stopped and faced us with a look of absolute horror in his face. We all hopped in the pickup bed and sped off. As we were driving away, we could see lights coming on all over his house. 16 years old, intoxicated as crap. His parents were less than happy. We didn't see him for a long time. We probably should have just gone outside with him, locked the door, and stayed with him until he had settled down and sobered up a little. Kind of felt sorry for him after his parents had gone through with him. Story 34. When I was in middle school, I kept being jumped on by one of my classmates. I'd hurt my back prior to all of this, and I'm not the skinniest person as well. Knowingly, he kept jumping on my back. Eventually, I got pretty angry. The next time he jumped on me, I ended up pushing him down onto the ground and axe-kicking his teeth out of blind anger. Not the smartest move because I broke one of his brace brackets. I felt really bad afterwards, but my back healed soon after. Story 35. During middle school, me and my best friend at the time were playing poker or some other card game involving gambling. There was some sort of disagreement, and I was certain that he owed me money. It felt like he didn't owe me anything. At some point, I was told by someone else that he was not going to pay me because I was a schmuck. I got mad because I'd known him well for years. I knew a lot of stuff about him. I started to use this info to turn everyone against him. This, in turn, made it a popularity contest, which I won. Mainly because I was the bigger schmuck and had no problem spilling everything I knew about him to all I knew with some added stuff to further humiliate him. In the end, he was pestered by most people he used to consider friends. I later found out that he needed some therapy during those times. I always went straight home after school, which was not typical behavior for him or for most kids in my country during middle school, especially for him because, like me, he was part of the popular kids. Years later, I apologized to him and we became friends again. Our lives headed to different directions, but we still see each other every now and then. That's pretty much the only thing I regret in my life. A feud over a few euros turned my friend's life into misery for a couple of years. I'm just glad he pulled through. But even though he forgave me, I don't think I can ever forgive myself. Story 36. When I was younger, I was at a birthday party. I was like 6, and everyone decided to have a water balloon fight. Medieval Uncle Ron left a pocket of air in the water balloon so that they couldn't pop. So my dad, not knowing the balloons couldn't pop, whipped the balloon at this random kid, and instead of hitting him and covering him in water, he just smacked him and fell off onto the ground. The kid was crying and he had a big red welt on his chest where the balloon hit, and my dad felt really bad and said to the kid, "Here, I'll do it to my own son to make you feel better." Then proceeded to whip a balloon at me, smacked me in the back and nearly took me off my feet. Left a big old red mark and hurt like crap. Felt like a grown man smacked a sunburn full force. To make matters worse, the kid's dad passed away from cancer 3 weeks later. He still had the bruise from the balloon at the funeral, and so did I. Story 37. I got into an argument in middle school over a game with a friend of mine, which led to insults and eventually him saying all sorts of things about my mom. A classic middle school move taken to the extreme, really. I wasn't really saying crap about his family because it never really bothered me when people talked crap about mine, especially if it was unfounded, like in this case. Eventually, I just looked at him and went, "Dude, your mom works for my mom." I felt so preppy and insufferable. I should add, she did, in fact, work for my mom's workshop. What was the worst, most damaging way you took revenge? I posted this story before, but it's relevant. I got to dispense a little justice to my neighbor once. I met the neighbor sitting outside, shining boots. It was in the Army National Guard. I walked over to introduce myself, and we talked a bit about the Army. I helped him shine his boots and pulled a couple of beers out of the cooler that I kept in the back of my truck. Fast forward a few months, and I'm silently wondering if I'm an alcoholic. The case of beer that I brought the day before yesterday had dwindled to a six-pack. I shrugged it off. I drove my wife's car to work one day that week. My wife worked in a shop across the street and phoned me to tell me that she's been watching the neighbor climb into my truck and stuff his pants with my beer. At first, I was going to confront him and demand restitution, but I decided that I could avenge my missing cans of beer by switching to bottles. So I switched, and when they were empty, I refilled them with recycled beer and recapped. Put them in my cooler and waited patiently. A few went missing. I waited. Nothing else was taken. My point was made. Well, I wouldn't say damaging. Story 2. When I was 11, there was a guy in the year above me that used to be an oppressor. He would stand over everyone, and he was massive for a 12-year-old. One day after doing PE, physical education class, I went to get changed into a uniform in the changing room that was backed into the classroom. Just my luck, this schmuck happens to be in there. What are the odds? Anyway, a few words are exchanged before he shoves me really hard into all these school bags that were stored in there and leaves. When I dusted myself off, something caught my eye. It was his bags. His mom had written his name in big bold letters, so I thought, screw him. And had a look, and to my great joy, discovered the sickest Dragon Ball Z card collection. He was a rich kid as well as an oppressor and had them at school to show off. So yeah, I stole them and never looked back. After school, I seen him crying like a witch telling his mom that they're missing. I do not know how to feel about this. Story 3. I was playing follow the leader with my best friend in kindergarten. It was the leader and ran up the slide. We weren't supposed to run up the slide, but we were 5 years old and could make our own decisions. I followed him, but the teacher saw me and told me to sit down on the pavement until the recess was over. So I told her that my friend went up first, and I just followed. The teacher called him over and asked if what I said was true, to which he said no. So then I told him we weren't friends until he said sorry. That showed him. He said sorry, and then we played Tony Hawk and his N64 after school. Wow, crazy consequences. Story 4. Damn it. I'm not proud of this. There was a girl on the bus. We'll call her Zwitch. ZW was not a nice person. Played truant all the time, but her dad was friends with the head, so she got off scot-free. Made fun of other kids. Kept one guy on the ropes and then webcammed herself having intimacy with her boyfriend to him. It's just a dumb, mean witch in general. So one day I was talking to my friends and made a silly joke about something inappropriate, not including her. She just chimed in with a comment about me being out of my depth and cackled at my then teenage lack of a girlfriend. Just standard witchy stuff. She does this twice more over the week. I was currently going through a depressive phase, so I just felt down about it. Then a few months later, a friend told me that she had a cancellation over the summer. At first, I was just bemused. Then I realized what this meant. So I added her on MySpace as a generic hi guy and commented how cute she was. She instantly added me, naturally. So after a few days of playing Charmer, I then proceeded to send her random pictures of babies for about a week. She quit school at the end of that term and left for good. Story 5. A neighbor who I never met accused me of trying to harm her dog through a double fence this winter. They have a wooden 6-foot stockade fence surrounded by a 4-foot chain link fence. The dog was injured on something in the backyard and required several stitches, which resulted in a large vet bill that they couldn't afford. They concocted the story that their animal-hating neighbor did this and began a fundraiser and raised quite a sum of money. Way more than the bill was. I had no idea about this whole drama until a friend in the police department told me of what this wacko was accusing me of. So once I found out, I requested a copy of the police report where the neighbor stated that the dog was hurt in their yard. There weren't any samples or human footprints near the fence, etc., etc., and I posted it to the fundraising site. She lost friends and a reputation for $400. Story 6. Not me, but my brother has always been one of those evil geniuses thinking 10 steps ahead of everyone else. In kindergarten, he went to a fancy private school and used to get picked on a lot for wearing glasses. The one time he actually fought back in self-defense, he got sent to the principal's office and lost recess privileges for a week. This was in January. He held on to that resentment all year. Fast forward to the last day of school, my brother consumes as many liquids as he possibly can and then doesn't use the bathroom all day. In the last hour of the day, he sneaks into the principal's office and whizzes everywhere. We're talking about all 4 walls, floor, and ceiling. Eventually, my brother gets caught. When the principal asked why he did it, he looked him straight in the eyes and said, "You angered me, so I whizzed on you. And that's how you get expelled from private school." That line was so metal. Story 7. I had this really witchy neighbor a few years ago. She and her boyfriend always did random crap to me and my stuff. Once, she drove my car with a Sharpie. It was a PP. Stole my garbage bins and hid them in the backyard. I've called the police on her many times, but she's got connections there, so she was always let off. Then she ended my cat. He was an outdoor cat, and while he was chilling, she fed him rat poison. How do I know? She told me so. Apparently, he was agitating her dogs, so she ended him. Her dogs were fancy, top-notch, 10K apiece dogs. They were all show dogs and freaking adorable. So I took all 3 of them and gave them to various friends and family members. One is in Canada, one is in the UK, and another in Japan. I didn't think I'd get away with it, but she didn't have any of those tracking microchips in her dogs, so I literally just took off the collar and they were mine. I moved shortly after that, but apparently she's still looking for them. Story 8. I'm biking my dog around my neighborhood. Some guy almost runs me over with his SUV while laughing and turning onto his driveway. I have to jump off my bike to avoid him. I get really angry and start punching and kicking his car. I get scared and stays inside his car. I walk to the back and pull out my pocket knife and put a huge gash along his back door with a huge grin on my face just to freak him out more. I go back to my bike with my dog, waiting patiently because he's never seen me that mad, and we bike home together towards the sunset. Story 9. When I was 14, my father and I spent every evening for a weekend refinishing a deck for a client. We finally got paid, $600 in cash, and head home for dinner. As we enjoy our meal inside, something darker is happening outside. The neighborhood teens who frequently roamed our streets happened to be walking by a driveway when they decided to see if any cars were unlocked. Guess which one was? The car with the cash. We were close to finishing dinner when my dad thought he heard something outside, which simultaneously made him remember the cash. He rushes out and sees the teens running off, only 25 yards down the road. After checking the car extensively for the money, he decides to call the cops. They believe him because the kids had done this before. Unfortunately, without them recovering the money, nothing could be proven. He was gone. For the next 2 years, they took every opportunity for revenge. They ambushed them at night with a paintball gun once, trapped 3 uncollared outdoor cats I knew belonged to them, and turned them into the shelter. I called the cops each time they drank beer outdoors, then sat and watched them get picked up. All of it felt good, and I feel we're even. Yeah, but it was $600, dude. Do you really think you're even yet? Story 10. So everyone has heard of the classic laxatives and the brownies trick, right? Well, my buddy pulled that weak sauce on me about a week ago, so I pulled this little ditty on him to show him just how much worse it can get. So there's this awesome weight loss medicine called Ali, which works by turning off the enzymes that digest ingested fats, so instead of being absorbed through the gut, they are instead passed right through the GI tract. Well, I took said buddy out to a truce dinner at the local Asian buffet. Pretty much fat covered fat, and slipped him a dose mid-meal. The amount that has exploded out of that, undeserving or deserving hole, is more revenge than I could ever hope for. Story 11. April Fool's Day this year. I had several friends send fake texts to another friend. Let's call him Steve, who lives in a different state. The texts were pretend responses to an imaginary ad offering free kins. Steve somehow figured out it was me, but then goes to a popular classified site and posts 3 separate ads with my number attached. Free puppies, free kins, and a free 42-inch flat-screen TV. I started receiving a flood of calls, texts, and voicemails. I was contacted by well over 150 interested individuals in the first couple of hours. I frantically tried to think of how I was going to get him back, and then it hit me. I responded to everyone by saying, "Sure, it's still available. Come by anytime tonight after 5. I'm Steve, here's my address." Except that it didn't always say 5. I told people to come at different times. Steve had a steady stream of angry or disappointed visitors that evening from 4 to 10 p.m. Story 12. In Catholic grade school, we took notes for 1 hour every day in theology class. Then we're given an exam that covered the entire year. I deliberately waited until mid-May, then acted out in class so that I'd have a lunch detention. That basically means they leave you unattended in your classroom, doing some BS assignment while everyone else is out at recess. During lunch detention, I stole the theology notebook from a kid's desk. I hated him and threw it in the sewer on my way home. I had to borrow someone else's notebook and rewrite the entire year's worth of notes by hand. It took him over a week, working 3 to 4 hours per day. Story 13. I was at a huge music festival in Wales. Long story short, some muscled raver schmucks stole all our booze out of their tent and drank the stuff in plain sight while laughing at us all. We confronted them. They denied it. They were much bigger than us and were surrounded by their friends. The next day, they all leave to go to the main venue tents, and my mate runs, dives into the tent, and disappears for a good 10 minutes. I'm wondering what the heck he's doing, so I walk over and open up the tent, only to find him squatting over a hole he's dug in the ground in the middle of their tent. And he's taking the biggest crap I've ever seen, just nonchalantly crapping in this hole. He finishes up, drags the canvas flooring back over this hole. We take a quick look for any booze we can have, but none that we could find, and we walk back to our tent. For the rest of the festival, we can hear these schmucks shouting about the ripe smell of crap everywhere, until one of the lads' girlfriends decides to drag the canvas bottom out of the tent and finds the hidden treasure trove of crap. Suffice to say, they had angered more people than just us, so when they confronted us, all we could do was deny it completely and laugh. Surprised we didn't get beaten up simply for taking the worst out of the situation like we did. It was a good festival. Jason's status weren't bad, found more booze, used the porta potties from then on. Story 14. I posted links to the website my ex-girlfriend did a few shoots with to online reviews of the legit business she ended up working for after getting her life straight. Sounds pretty awful, huh? I still wish I hadn't done it, but she had just tried to get me fired when she discovered I had moved on by telling completely fabricated stories. I mean, stories with no basis in truth. I have children. Trying to get me fired was evil. I texted after the posts with exactly this: telling lies to get people fired is lame, dude. The truth works so much better. I really shouldn't have, but I was angry and it felt like self-defense at the time. Story 15. Once when I was at school, this annoying kid used to sit next to me and copy my work. For a while, I let it happen despite being angry at the same time. Anyway, one day I was in a particularly bad mood and he was up to his usual tricks. At this point, he wasn't even being subtle about it and he just casually reached across and started pulling my sheets of paper close to him. I snapped and said, "Just take my freaking work." I put my hand flat on the sheets of paper and viciously slid them along the desk in his direction, letting go of them swiftly. Air got underneath the paper and they lifted up in the direction of his face. One corner of a sheet of paper flung straight up into his eyeball and I immediately thought, crap, what have I done? After crying for a bit, he moved his hand away and his eye was inflamed right next to his iris. To this day, his eyes still look the same and I'm ridden with guilt whenever I see him. Well, you couldn't have known, but yeah. Story 16. Not the worst, but funniest. I dated a guy for 3 years and broke up with him when I found out he was married. Whole other story. I basically did nothing when I found out other than stop speaking to him. About 6 months later, I was thinking about it and wanted to send a little jab, so I logged into the student library site with his student card info and ordered a few dozen books on adultery to be delivered to his office. Option available to grad students, which he shared with 2 colleagues. He's a computer science major, so the books were definitely not part of his studies. It was little, but gave me a laugh. Story 17. Went paintballing. One schmuck thought it would be hilarious to shoot me in the back of the leg to see if it worked. Obviously, it hurt like freaking crazy. Anyway, 2 rounds in, we get put on the same team. He's forgotten about it because he's done about 30 other schmucks things since then. He walks about 10 feet in front of me as we begin the round and says, "Is everyone ready?" So I shot him in the back of the leg and said, "Yeah, just gotta see if my gun is working." He turns around screaming at me, so, ever so calmly, I shoot him again. Judging by his reactions, I shot his left jewels. Walked away, he went home. Victory. Story 18. I was sleeping when my back door was broken down by 2 men. I yelled and they left. The young kid knocked on my door and said he saw it and that one of the thieves had a blue jacket and a yellow hat. I was livid and got into my car to scour the neighborhood. It took me about 5 minutes to find them and I drove up to them while in my car. I was yelling at them. The kid with the blue jacket kept his head low and walked away while his friend confidently approached my car. I kept yelling that they had broken down my door. Mr. Confident told me to calm down and that they had done nothing. I asked for their names. A fake one was given. I told them I was going to the police and that a witness had seen Mr. Blue Jacket in my yard. With that, I guess Mr. Confident got scared and he reached for me. I floored it and he held onto my window and I dragged him for about 20 yards. He was twice my size and would have beaten me senseless, but I managed to get away. Called the cops and eventually they were busted. One of the dumbest things I've ever done. Story 19. I worked in an office once and the boss was a real schmuck. If he used any of your sick days, he would hold that against you at your yearly review. But if he was sick at all or even just felt like it, he would stay home or go golfing. Well, there was a terrible flu going around. I was sick, a coworker was sick and throwing up in his trash bin. but none of us were allowed to leave. So when my boss went home super early, again, I went into his office and coughed and sneezed all over his mouse and keyboard. They got really sick a day later. Damn, that's just evil, dog. Story 20. Not exactly the worst revenge, but I think it's funny. My ex-mother-in-law was one of those, a wife serves her husband and does everything kind of people. She always criticized me. My housework, the meals I cooked, etc. I decided to get even by filling a sock with the dust from my vacuum canister. Every day I'd stop by her house and take a moment to shake the sock around her house. It left dust everywhere. The floors were the easiest. Everyone's socks would get dirty from walking around. Her husband was noticing she wasn't doing her duty. The best was when I went and shook dust all over her couch pillows and returned that night. I made a show of flopping down on the couch from being so exhausted from work. Dust went everywhere. Her husband was like, "What the heck? Don't you ever vacuum?" Story 21. When I was first out on my own, I went to live temporarily with some friends while I settled in and got my own place. I put most of my belongings in the storage unit of their apartment. I went back a week or so after moving into my own place to get my things, and my buddy told me that the guy he knows downstairs from him had taken my bed set. I went down to confront them about it, and when they opened the door, I could see straight into their apartment and into the bedroom. And there was my bed. They denied it and said their uncle gave it to them and shut the door in my face. I asked my buddy if he knew which car they owned, and he did. He pointed it out, and I checked the doors. They were unlocked. I went into my car and grabbed the extra bottles of motor oil I had and proceeded to coat the interior of their car in motor oil. The last bottle covered the driver's seat. Then I walked next door to the 7-Eleven, bought a carton of milk, and poured it into the vents of the car. I don't know if that's justified. What do you guys think? Share in the comments. Story 22. This is my dad's story from when he was a kid. He was walking down the road one day when a bunch of kids in their late teens pulled up in a car and sprayed him with a fire extinguisher. He blew it off as a joke and thought it was pretty funny. 5 minutes later, the same kids circle around and spray him a second time. This time, my dad took note of the license plate number, make, and model of the car and proceeded to track it down and find out where the kid lived. That night, he went to the kid's house and threw a fire extinguisher through the car's windshield. Justice was served. Story 23. One day, I was parked at school in the parking lot and someone literally blocked me in. It was a 2-car parking lot and they decided to put their car behind mine so I couldn't pull out. It was my last class of the day and I was angry that day for some reason. I keyed the entire car all around. I poured lantern fluid I had in my car all over the door handles and the windshield. I even went as far as putting like 3 nails I had in my car on the back of the tires so when they pulled out, they would go through the tire. I then became very paranoid that I could probably go to jail for this, and luckily the guy in front of me pulled out before the car that blocked me in. I had to wait 3 hours after class for that schmuck. Story 24. Last year was my first time playing with airsoft guns. Right around the end of 2013 summer, I was invited to my friend's woodland property to play with his guns. There were about 12 of us, and sadly I was the only chick. After being divided into a team, my one friend, we'll call him Greek, relentlessly showered my bum in bullets. Greek was not only literally 3 times my size, but was also large enough to just shake me out of the trees I was trying to snipe in. So, around the end of the night, I crouched under a bush and saw the schmuck coming towards me. I shot him. In the jewels. Down he fell like a mighty oak, screaming at the top of his lungs, "She shot me in the jewels!" After rallying everyone over to see the commotion, we all had a good laugh while he vomited and writhed in the mud, then helped him inside. I'm still good friends with Greek. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 25. When I was around 12 and my brother was like 13 or 14, we had a race to get to the shower. He only wanted to take one because I said I was going to take one. Naturally, he beat me there. To take revenge, I flushed the downstairs toilet. I don't know if anyone lived in that old house before, but our house was close to 100 years old. That mess with the water temperature, it was shooting out fiery hot boiling lava water. I kept flushing it. I flushed it every single time I could. He called me upstairs about 45 minutes later. He said the water was too hot and that he couldn't figure out what to do. He had shampoo in his eyes and he couldn't rinse it off. We turned off the shower and I took him outside to our backyard. I sprayed him down with the hose. The whole time he was telling me what a good sister I was and how much he appreciated this. People we knew walked by our street and they thought it was hilarious. I wasn't going to tell him. I was going to save it and do it every single time he got to the shower, but my mom caught me the next time I did it and she told everyone. That's my one story. The only time I gave as good as I got. Story 26. Years and years ago, I had a connection for satellite card programmers. I had friends and such that I would get them for. My friend's dad wanted one. So I got him one. I think they were around $100. Didn't collect money from him right away. Called him a couple times to collect and he decided he wasn't going to pay me because he couldn't figure out how to program his cards. Not really my problem. Called him a few more times. He just flat out refused and told me he was going to call the police and let them know I was selling satellite programmers. He had made his money in software, so thought he could do whatever he wanted. I hate schmucks like that. I was 19 or so, and $100 wasn't exactly expendable, so I put brake fluid in a spray bottle and completely coated his new Escalade. Never saw my $100. Still hangs out with his kid to this day. Story 27. Second year of high school. Ski trip to Italy. Fantastic. We're walking through this moderately large Italian town through the snow to our hotel when we come across a large stretch of grass, buried under 3 feet of snow. Giant snowball fight ensues. I have no friends at this point, no alliances, so I just try and stay out of it, wading through the snow until this huge schmuck in my ear comes up behind me and shoves me hard into the snow. I hear him guffaw and stomp away. I know who he is. I'll always remember. But right now I'm stuck in the snow. I push myself up and try to walk, but I create a vacuum under my feet and somehow my boot gets sucked off. I stagger backwards with my feet covered in socks saturated in freezing water and fall backwards down a slope. I'm completely freezing and soaked. I find my way back up the hill, but I'm only 3.5 feet tall. The snow is up to my shoulders and it takes an age. When I finally reach the top, my class is gone. Long gone. I'm lost in some town with no idea where to go. I eventually managed to find my boots again, and with a lot of luck, I even managed to find the hotel after an hour of trekking around. A year passes. I ended up befriending my nemesis. I bond with him over the next 2 years, gaining his trust, keeping him close. When one day we're walking back from school and I'm struck by thought. Here he is, vulnerable, trusting, oblivious. I fall back and let him walk ahead slightly, and then I take a run up and kick him in the bum as hard as I possibly can. As you may recall, this is a big bloke, and by this point I'm still not a giant, now a towering 3'9". But he falls to the ground clutching his bum. I start laughing maniacally. That was for pushing me in the snow 3 years ago, you schmuck. I shout, pointing at him. You pushed me in the snow on that ski trip, and I didn't know where it was, and I ended up missing dinner. I have waited so long for this. He just stares at me, gobsmacked. Then he starts to laugh, that familiar guffaw of his. Wow, Madison, you're one sneaky little idiot. Story 28. I'm a bit late, but nevertheless, my fiance's ex-boyfriend used to hurt her. She finally got the guts to leave him, and that's when she met me shortly after. A few years go by, and we don't see him in town at all, and so my fiance went about her days as though he never existed. However, a few years pass, and my fiance's ex-boyfriend sees her at a bar with her friends while he's intoxicated. I was at home at the time, and she called me crying, telling me what he had just done. I immediately drove myself and a friend down to the bar and dragged his bum outside. We were roughing the crap out of him in front of all his buddies. We then slashed both tires in his motorcycle before leaving. His so-called buddies stood there laughing at him the whole time. A few days later, he tried to press charges, but backed down like the witch he is when my fiancé threatened to press charges. That's right. You got what was coming for you. Story 29. When I was 11 years old, I injured both my arms in a biking accident. My mom, being the skeptic that she is, didn't believe me and waited 2 to 3 days before taking me to the hospital to get them looked at. Turns out my left humerus was completely broken and my right radius was fractured. Because she waited so long, my left arm is now slightly crooked from being set wrong, but it wasn't set bad enough to get rebroken and reset. I still haven't forgiven her, and for the next month after it happened, I would keep hiding her keys in different places in the morning and watch her get confused when she would look for them, wondering where she last put them. To this day, she still doesn't know that I hid them. Needless to say, she was late to work a few times. That is so petty, but I respect it. Story 30. First job in retail. I was really close with the rest of the team. Some newcomers were hired for the summer, which gave us some healthy competition. We were on commission. One girl kept stealing everyone else's sales, and when she was confronted, she gave absolutely no crap and continued taking everyone's sales. Our schedule was always done on paper, and it's everyone's job to read their schedules properly for the following week. In the case you can't physically come into the store to write your schedule, you have to call and speak to a manager to read out your schedule over the phone. Anyways, she ended up calling and didn't ask for a manager to give her the schedule. Gave her all the wrong shifts, which followed by termination due to job abandonment. Missing work 3 shifts in a row. That is evil. Story 31. When I caught my now ex-wife and now ex-best friend fooling around on my living room floor, I proceeded to roughen the crap out of him. I threw him into the corner of her couch and he laid there for a bit. At this point, my rage directed me to my wife. Her look was a mixture of terror, confusion, and surprise. Before I went in, my morals against hitting women got a second wind and I immediately left the house. As I left, I carried my best friend out of the house, left him on the lawn, explained he had an hour to tell his pregnant wife what he was caught doing. I left the house then. My wife tried following me. Guess who got a DUI not more than 5 minutes later? Yep, she did. Just adding to this all, both me and my friend were military. Why is this relevant? Let's just say adultery and DUI are highly frowned upon. He ended up getting 2 NJPs, one for DUI, one for adultery. His wife left him, took the kid they already had, and is keeping his new one distanced from him. For my ex-wife, she received a DUI, which also screwed over her prospect of joining the military also. Oh, she lost me. I regard myself as quite a catch. Last I saw, she was messing around with some low rank who was in the process of getting kicked out. Good riddance. Story 32. When my grandparents were younger, they lived in flats, and the woman in the flat below them, nearest to the post box, would always read their letters. My granddad knew because she could tell that she was resealing the glue over her kettle. So one day he decided to send a letter to himself, but include a black hair of my nan's. The woman having the same colored hair would pick it out, thinking it was hers. However, with this, he also included a note saying, "Stop reading her letters, you nosy idiot." My granddad's a rather blunt guy. Needless to say, their post was never opened again, and he never received that letter back. Story 33. When I was about 18, I knew a guy from school, same age, who was in a rock band. It was a complete and utter a-hole. One day I came home and his car was parked in my driveway at my parents' house. I'm thinking, what the heck is going on here? So after seeing his car in the driveway multiple times a week, I realized he was fooling around with a girl next door while her dad was working the night shift. I confronted him about it and he told me to screw off and mind my own business. I argued with him and told him it was wrong. Again, he told me to mind my own business and to screw off. The next day I come home and he's in my parking place again. So I'm furious. I went into the garage and found a bottle of concentrated muriatic acid used for cleaning stone. I poured it in his gas tank. Afterwards, I felt really bad about it, but it was done. There was no undoing it. This car amazingly shows up for a couple more nights, then it stops coming. I later heard that a series of failures occurred. The carburetor was completely destroyed, followed by a leaking gas tank, followed by gas lines. He junked the car. A short time after that, I heard he got my neighbor pregnant. To keep himself from going to jail, he agreed to marry her, and they had another child a short time later. She caught him cheating on her, and she divorced him, and she took him to the cleaners. He was in financial ruin for 2 decades. It's weird. When I think back to those days, I don't know why I didn't just call the cops. If I'd told her father, he would have ended him. I mean, literally ended him. Her father was a vicious psychopath. After all these years, I still feel guilty about destroying that schmuck's car. Nah, I think you did a good thing. Story 34. When I was in high school, I flipped burgers at a fast food place. A few months in, I was fired by an assistant manager. She used to yell at people to get her way, and I wouldn't have any of that, so she claimed I was rude to customers, and I was fired. Almost 15 years later, I discovered she now worked at a company owned by a friend of mine. I bought him dinner. She was fired. The job she did had nothing to do with a fast food place, and hadn't talked to her in 15 years. It didn't matter that she might have been a good worker or a changed person. It was petty revenge, and yet I enjoyed it quite a bit. Story 35. A few years ago during the summer, I was riding my bike to a friend's house along a fairly quiet road. When I say quiet, I mean road in a newly developed neighborhood which is only local traffic and people on bikes or foot. Being that there was no sidewalk to ride on, I was well off to the right of the road. But some nugget decided it would be fun to tailgate a bicycle while driving a Mustang. As he panicked and pedaled faster, he just kept speeding up and slowing down or revving his engine until he accidentally nudged my tire, causing me to fall off of my bike. He comes to a full stop for a moment and speeds off shortly after. Knowing that it's almost always local traffic that goes through that area, it wasn't too hard to find out where he lived. Fast forward 2 weeks and I ended up at his house at 4 in the morning with a large water bottle full of cement mix. I turned on his neighbor's hose and filled his gas tank to the brim with water, then dumped the cement mix into the remaining room left around the cab. To this day, that piece of crap Mustang is still sitting in his driveway with a for sale sign on it, and he's now driving an even crappier Corolla. Story 36. Quote-unquote friend I had was 24/7 teasing me how I could never get a girl and was doomed to be forever alone because I was on a dry streak. Goes around boasting about how he had fooled around several women, as he put it, including a 21-year-old. We were 16 at the time. Stopped being amusing after a while. We're in an hour lecture, he'd be constantly passing these comments and generally being a schmuck. Sometime later, I bought a new phone with a new number, and before I gave my number back to everyone, a thought occurred to me. I sent him a text saying, "I'm pregnant. We need to talk." He disappeared for the rest of the school day while sending me a lot of messages trying to find out who I was, and I later saw him freaking the crap out and crying outside. Well, I guess he was messing around with women. Story 37. I used to hang out with this girl that was cute, smart, etc. She was pretty eccentric in an attractive way. I was kind of out of it. We stopped hanging out for a while, and one night I saw her out. We chatted it up. She said she missed me. Her friend was with her, who I'm friends with as well. She mentioned the girl had been on substance, smoking some weird-ish, but hadn't in a while. Girl I was into asked if I wanted to go home with her. Along the way, she started screaming at me and calling me a wuss because I didn't make any overt move on her, and sometimes cute guys like me can be too nice. She went on to say that she hopes I'm ready to fool with her. I guess I was ready. When we got back to her house, I actually wasn't feeling it, but it was whatever. She immediately passed out, like her eyes were rolled back in her head. I threw some water on her face, took her pulse, etc. I was pretty angry, mostly because I was dumb enough to go home with her. But she had this fantastic glitter portrait of David Bowie, so I took that. I had it for a couple weeks. She saw me in a bar and threatened to call the police on me if it wasn't returned in 48 hours. I obliged. Story 38. I was pestered for years by this Asianish guy who always messed with me for no particular reason. My parents forbade me to fight back because I was bigger than him and I could get in trouble. One day, I was just sick of it. I caught him when he wasn't looking and I threw him to the floor. I jumped over him and started hitting him. Full psycho. My friends realized what was going on and went over to me to stop it. It took 6 people to pull me away from him. Later, I knew he got severe injuries, and if I kept hitting him, I could have broken it and possibly end him. I tried to look worried for him, but I just wanted to laugh so badly. He never messed with anyone again. Also, I helped bro steal his girlfriend. Remember, kids, there's only one way to deal with oppressors. Story 39. One day at school, I got punched in the face by my friend because I nagged him to let me in on an inside joke I knew was about me. I was totally dumbstruck for the first few seconds, until I felt the warm dribble of red liquid coming from my nose. I got up from my chair and in retaliation grabbed the nearest object off my desk to throw at him. This happened to be a rather thick textbook. In one swift motion, I turned around to face him, threw the book, turned back around as it hit him, and walked out the door towards the nearest bathroom. I didn't see the impact. A few minutes later, I'm still in the bathroom, cleaning up. The principal walks in. He asks, "Did you throw that textbook at that boy?" "Yeah." "Why?" I replied. "Because he's been cut and needs to be sent to the hospital. I got a week suspension because it wasn't intentional. Honestly, who expects a book to do that?" When I came back to school the next week, I went to him immediately and apologized. He didn't even care. It was water under the bridge. It's simultaneously the least intentional and most damaging way of taking revenge on someone. Hey, at least he forgave you. Story 40. I was doing laundry in my co-ed dorm in college. I went to put my clothes in the dryer only to find them all full. They had windows in the loaders and I saw one that was running but looked empty, so we opened it. There was a dry windbreaker by itself, so I removed it, placed it on top of the dryer and loaded my wet clothes. A few minutes later, some prissy girl comes downstairs and starts screaming and asks if there were my clothes in that dryer. So I deny it to avoid a ridiculous argument over her dry windbreaker taking up a whole dryer. She then throws my clothes on the floor and starts her windbreaker back in the dryer, checks on her clothes in another dryer and leaves. I immediately went to a vending machine, bought 4 bags of M&Ms and threw 2 in each of her dryers. I hung my clothes on my door and bed frame to dry. Story 41. My ex-husband was cheating on me. I knew it somehow, but I wasn't sure what I was going to do about it, or wasn't thinking clearly at the time, so I went to the motel room, which was in a different town, and took his truck and parked it somewhere else far enough from where he was staying. The next morning, himself and his little lovebird got out and went to go to a meeting. It was work-related. The truck was missing. I didn't know they drove together, so the truck was reported stolen and they missed their meeting. Well, he went for some smokes and saw his truck. I imagine scratched his head and drove it back and picked up honey cakes. Well, on the way home, they were pulled over and were arrested for driving a stolen vehicle, which all got sorted out at the police station when I showed up, as well as Honeycake's husband. That is such a good gotcha moment. Story 42. As a student, I lived in a house with 2 others. Anyway, one of them came into my room intoxicated one evening, picked up a dumbbell or weight. When I asked him to put it down, he threw the dumbbell onto a piece of metal furniture I had in my room. That piece of furniture was damaged badly. Fuming, I picked this skinny man up and put him outside my room. I managed to bend it back into shape, but the marks were still there. Anyway, to get my revenge, we were going for drinks later that night, so he had a few more drinks and still didn't really have control over his behavior. When we got home, I went to his room to see how I could get revenge. He used to keep a pint glass of water by his bedside table to drink through the night. Before he goes to bed, I tipped 2/3 the water in his pint glass out, topped it up with super strength vodka. He drank it all through the night. I didn't see him for 24 hours. Said he had the worst hangover he'd ever had. Revenge. That could have gone south so bad. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.